Good evening. Welcome to the City of Opa-locka virtual workshop in relation to COVID-19 and the budget. We've been doing these workshops every week since the pandemic started to make sure we get the latest information from staff about the city's response to COVID-19 and make steps in which we can do to address the issues. You also know that we're dealing with a financial crisis. So at this moment, we have a preliminary budget workshop to make sure that we get our budget in by August 1st, deadline set by Financial Oversight Committee. So today we're looking forward to participation and making sure that we resolve these two issues within the city and also ensure that our city is thriving day to day, week to week. So with that said, Madam Clerk, roll call.
Commissioner Bass?
I'm here.
Commissioner Burke?
Here.
Vice Mayor Davis?
Here.
Commissioner Kelly?
Present.
Mayor Paget?
I'm here. Madam Attorney, could you state the virtual protocols that govern these workshops?
Sure. Pursuant to Executive Order number 2069, issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members physically present or at any specific location and utilizing communications media technology such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Section 120.54 5B2 of the Florida statutes. The members of the City Commission appearing remotely for this meeting are Vice Mayor Davis, Commissioner Bass, Commissioner Burke, Commissioner Kelly, and Mayor Paget. An opportunity was given to the public to email the city clerk prior to the prior to this commission meeting. The city clerk will state for the record at the appropriate time whether there have been any questions, comments, concerns on the items or anything that you will hear on this meeting's agenda. This meeting is being streamed live at youtube.com/user/City of Opa-locka.
Thank you very much, Madam Attorney. Commissioner Bass, could you lead us in the invocation?
Our Father who art in heaven, we thank you for this is truly a day that you have made. We thank you, oh God, for minds that are here in this one place, Lord God, to make decisions, Father God. We just ask you that you would give us wisdom, knowledge, and revelation. We ask you that you will bless our community in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Chief, could you lead us in Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, could you state how the public can participate in this meeting and also if we have any public comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So the public had an opportunity to submit their comment ahead of the meeting via email to publiccomments@opalockafl.gov. Comments submitted by members of the public by email will be read into the record during the meeting as long as they provide the comments by the deadline, which is 2 hours prior to the scheduled meeting time. Comments received after the deadline will be kept for the record, but will not be read during the meeting. And Mr. Mayor, I don't have any public comments at this time.
All right. As we upgrade our technology infrastructures to ensure that we can have an engaging public comment section during the live meeting, I strongly encourage, and we all strongly encourage that the public take the time to submit those comments through public comments at opalockafl.gov. We really want to make sure that despite COVID-19, we continue to be engaging and the public can let their voices be heard to your commission. That's what we're here for. That's why we do these meetings. We want to make sure that we are responsive to you as a public. So please make sure that you take advantage of that. All right, with that said, as stated at the beginning of this meeting, we're here to discuss the city's response, our proposed face mask ordinance, and also the proposed budget for the upcoming year. So with that, Mr. Manager, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mayor, City Commission, Vice Mayor, staff. Today, I'm going to give a brief update on the city's efforts in regards to COVID-19. As everybody is aware, we do have a testing site in town. Over the last week, their testing numbers have fluctuated. And over the last 3 to 4 days, they have reported numbers over 100 tested. With today, the tested number tested be 168. So those numbers are going up greatly as far as the number of people being tested at the testing site over the last week. So I'm hopeful that that number will remain the same. As many of y'all may not know, the testing site has a new incident commander. His name is Randy Brunson, I believe it is. Yeah, Randy Brunson. He replaced our previous incident commander on Monday. He's very, very much helpful, retired fire chief, very knowledgeable of incidents such as these, in regards to COVID-19 and other pandemics. So I want to welcome him aboard and for working for the city of Opa-locka. As we go into hurricane season, myself and my staff are kind of changing gears and setting up planning, even though there is some pre-existing planning, looking at the other planning methods and techniques in regards to hurricane season, and we will start working on that pretty much immediately. So that'll be our main focus next week, preparedness and planning. As you all know, you all are from here. I'm a Chicago boy. So it's gonna take me a little bit to get used to you all's emergency procedures and how you guys handle hurricanes in South Florida. But I'm sure I'll be more than able to catch on quickly. We do have masks that need to be passed out to members of the community. We're still trying to figure out the methodology of how we're gonna do that. So that is a work in progress, but there's something that should be occurring shortly. We also are getting our temperature measuring units in. We have one that's scheduled to be installed next Wednesday at the old city, at the new city hall. And we have several others on order for the park facilities currently. So we're moving towards the direction to reopen the building for public use. So public can come to City Hall to conduct business. I think I hit the big highlights. If there's anything I missed, please let me know, but I'll take any questions in regards to COVID-19.
Any questions for the manager?
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Kelly?
Mr. Manager, you said the numbers are going up 168. That means more folks are being tested, which is a good thing. But we still don't know exactly how many of those might be exactly Opa-locka residents.
No, through the mayor, no, Commissioner Kelly, there's still no mechanism how to separate them out, who's Opa-locka, who's not. When we do our evening research or morning research on the reporting site, those that tested at all the testing sites, those numbers are calculated and they're made available on the site where we pull our numbers. But I don't know, I would know per batch of tests how many were Opa-locka residents and all that. I wouldn't get that information. We only receive that on the state level at this time.
Okay. Well, this goes to kind of the coronavirus because of our curfew. Has there been? What is your thoughts on that as relates to the virus? I know not a lot, but some have lifted curfews. We still have ours in place, and part of the reason was because of trying to slow down or keep people from spreading. Any new thoughts on that? Or we're still maintaining that, or is the public safety folks still think we ought to keep it to help us keep the numbers or keep people from maybe spreading or contracting?
Through the mayor.
Floor is open, Mr. Pate.
Okay. Chief Dobson, I would ask you to answer the question in which should the curfew still be in place based on a public safety aspect?
Mr. Mayor, I would say yes, that we should maintain the curfew. It is a little difficult because the county and some of the other cities have opened, but say yes, that it would assist us in continues to try to keep this pandemic down a little.
Okay, so are there anything we're doing to make sure that our folks know that we still had a curfew versus the county? And you said other cities have lifted theirs, so there's no misconflict, or how are we making sure that we're keeping ours, because we're trying to keep folks safe, or as a result of the pandemic that we still, our numbers are high. How are we getting that word out, or how are we communicating that?
So through the mayor, so Commissioner Kelly, we are reporting that on almost daily basis on our Facebook and social media. We do weekly robocalls. We have a robocall either coming out today or tomorrow in regards to the matter as well. So we're kind of working on dealing with those things, as well as far as trying to put out information. We are constantly looking at methods to communicate better to the public. But we have been using robocalls. We have done other things. Miss Jessica, could you chime in just a little bit of what we've done in regards to the curfew and what we've done as far as notification to our residents?
Yes, sir. We have been placing that on the social media and ensuring every time that the times have changed that we have that correct information listed. And I can speak with you after this to see if we needed to try to do any type of advertising on social media to ensure that the residents understand that we still are under a curfew.
Thank you. I only bring it up because, and I know it's somewhat separate, but sometimes it gets miscommunicated. The county's lifted their curfew. The state attorney's not prosecuting, curfew violations related to protests, et cetera. So I just want to be clear or sure how we're getting that message out so we don't get miscommunication. Thank you for the information on that regarding the COVID-19. I'll wait for the others for the mask. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Burke.
I don't know whether the city manager said it before, but I might have missed it. What are our positive numbers now, and how much have they went up in the last couple of days, Mr. Manager?
I can look. Hold on. Let's see here. Looking now. So as of the 10th, we are at 389. The number's 389 as of the 10th.
And how much of that went up since the last count?
It went up about 5 since the day before.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else? Few things, Mr. Manager. Number one, you asked about how we're going to give out masks. I was under the impression that the mask was being retained for city staff, emergency staff, and also as a way of education if this mask ordinance, when this mask ordinance is put in place, so that officers are able to right then, or whoever the enforcement agency or the mask ordinance are able to provide masks to people that may be in violation to prevent any violation. Is that not the case anymore?
No, that's still the plan, Mayor.
Okay. The second thing is about opening up City Hall. I know there was you mentioned that you are planning to open up City Hall so that people can come back into City Hall to do business. And I know that we currently had a positive case within City Hall, and cases are spiking all across Florida. What measures are being put in place to ensure that we reduce the level of infection with City Hall? Because I'm a little hesitant to really open up City Hall back to business normal. So could you give more details on that?
So we're working on first getting that temperature control device installed and getting it working and tested. And then from there, make a decision of if we open up City Hall or not. If the COVID-19 rate in the city still continues to skyrocket as it is now, my recommendation would be probably to keep City Hall closed indefinitely until we figure out some way to try to control the virus, even within our own areas in the city. That would be my advice. As far as what's going on inside the building, we have a cleaning company that disinfects every doorknob, bathroom, every facility within the City Hall building on a constant basis, on a rolling basis of disinfecting. They enter our offices, they disinfect the offices and other common areas that we have as well.
Okay. All right. I wanted to make sure we're taking all precautions to reduce this level of infection within the city of Opa-locka, and especially not having our government building that contribute in any way, shape, or form to that. So look forward to seeing that in action. And I noticed in our budget proposal, there are some technology proposals in fiscal year 2021 in order to create a more virtual experience where all city business can be done. I don't know if there's a way in which that may be implemented a little faster than after October 1st. But I'm hoping that those are considerations that we're thinking about doing now and over the next few months to ensure we can have a robust system where citizens, business owners can come in, do whatever permitting, bill collection, city staff can have a call center or number in which residents can call to get answers, can get transferred to others. And also staff has the ability to continue to work if they're at home on quarantine or anything of that nature, so that we can maximize taxpayers' dollars when it comes to how we do business in the city of Opa-locka. Right. With that, if there's no other comments on the city's response to coronavirus disease in the manager's report. And then
Mr. Mayor, I would ask for the police department to provide a small report, as well as Ms. Mockins, and as far as what marketing efforts we've done over the last week and moving forward in regards to COVID-19.
Okay.
Chief Dobson, you have the floor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I couldn't hear the manager. You wanted me to report what, sir?
Do your a typical COVID-19 report that what you would do as far as curfews and social distancing, arrest, no arrest, how many warnings, etc.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
For this week, we have provided for face mask warnings total number of 416 face mask warnings. For social distancing, 592 warnings for social distancing. COVID arrests, which were business owners operating clubs / restaurants, which were warned several times. No patrons were social distance, no wearing face masks for 2 restaurants. We broke up 2 large parties and 3 large parties, correct, 3 large parties, 2 in the apartment communities and 1 block party, 1700 block of Opa-locka Boulevard. That's where we are for COVID. I have the list of all addresses that I can provide to the commission on where those warnings were given also, if you would like.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that report. Ms. Mockins, you're on the table. It's on you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Our report is that we increased our outreach. We're currently running ads on radio and social media. We had a Souls Take Control COVID-19 event, testing event on Sunday. We had around 8 churches and organizations that participated in that. We have a multilingual code red alert going out this week. Our social media increased about 8,000 people were engaged on our platform this week. And that concludes our report. Were there any questions?
All right, does anyone have any questions for the manager and Chief Dotson or Ms. Mockins?
Mayor Praggett?
Commissioner Bass?
To the police chief, I misunderstood what he said, something about COVID and the number 2. What was that?
Mr. Mayor. Commissioner Bass, the number 2 were 2 arrests. There were 2 restaurants that we warned on several occasions to have their patrons be within the social distance and or face masks. And it was after curfew hours. So we went back after the hours again and warned them, and they continued. So when we went back the next time, the owners of those establishments were arrested.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes, thank you. To the chief again, you said you had over 400 warnings for face masks?
Yes, sir.
And you had how many for curfews, if any?
Curfews, we didn't have any listed under the curfew.
Oh, okay. And you said clubs / restaurants. You had, are there clubs open? Are businesses open?
No clubs, sir. The restaurants that have the alcohol licenses, that's what I was representing. We don't have any clubs that are open, no, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, on that.
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor Davis?
Mr. Mayor, to the manager, I asked for the manager's office to look into, I guess, different classifications of businesses that are allowed to open. I know one specific category that speaks to gyms and fitness centers. I know we have at least one in the city. And I don't know if they're operating or not, or even if our current emergency order even gives them the authority to do so. But can the manager's office speak to that issue?
So as far as gyms and facilities like that, Opa-locka does not have any specific orders that prohibit it. The orders that prohibit gyms and establishments as you describe come from the county. So those are dictated by the county emergency orders. And I'm pretty sure gyms were reopened in this last emergency order that he just went out. we did reopen gyms with special social distancing requirements. I'm pretty sure of that.
Okay, so they are allowed to operate based on the county's ordinance, which we're pretty much shadowing at this point.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else for the chief, the manager, or Ms. Mockins? All right, Mr. Manager, did that conclude your report on the city's response to coronavirus?
Yes, sir. Unless there's any areas that you want me to hit that you think I didn't hit.
No, sir. To all the public that are watching, I'm going to make sure that please spread the word, let people know that we do have a COVID-19 testing center here in the city of Opa-locka where you can walk up and bring children 12 and older, as long as you have a birth certificate for those between 12 and 18. Please make sure we take full advantage of this COVID-19 and social distance and wear the mask so that we can protect each other from the spread of this disease. Now I want to move on to the ordinance relating to face masks or face covering. Mr. Manager, could you first begin with your report on the implementation of this and the implementation of this, and then we'll go into the actual amendments that were proposed.
So as discussed last week, the city manager's office will be requesting that this matter be, if passed by the commission, be implemented in a future date to give the city manager's office enough time to reallocate resources within the city manager's office in order to be able to write, maintain, store, and collect the fines associated with the mask ordinance. What my intent tonight is, and I'm happy the mayor opened it up to me in regards to this, is actually to include Chief Dobson. I don't know if Jerry is on the line. Is Jerry here today? No, Jerry. Okay. I'm gonna ask Bob to take Jerry's place because it's gonna involve some financial stuff. So I just want to make sure that I'm together. So as I envision this process, Mayor, I envision the citation is issued. Chief Dobson,
Yes, sir.
if we issue a citation that is only a local citation that does not go beyond the county or state, you all already have a ticket book or mechanism or document that you can write a ticket and it can be local to enforce the mask ordinance? Or do we have to order new ticket books or new materials to write that ticket?
Yes, sir. We would have to order new citations would be for the civil citation. We would need to order new citations for that. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, and then Chief, how do you envision when these new citations are issued to officers and these citations are actually written? Where do you see as a record repository for those tickets, that database? Where would that exist?
Sir, there would have to be somewhere here in the city, somewhere where they could actually come to pay the citation itself. So it would have to be somewhere here internally in the city for them to do that and not go to Miami-Dade County.
Okay, and then I'm talking about the actual storage of tickets, the storage of the paper copies of the tickets that are given, because I'm sure it'd be like 3-ply where the original goal is given to the person, then you probably have 2 additional copies, one for whoever and one for the city. Where would that be maintained and what type of computer system would we enter that stuff in? If it does not exist. If it does exist, great. If it does not exist, then we would need to get new software.
Then, yes, sir. Currently, it does not exist, so it would be something starting new that we would have to do. So we would definitely need some type of software to make that happen. We currently do not have a system for that.
Okay. All right, and so when we envisioning this system, we're collecting these tickets. You have people that are gonna pay tickets, people are not gonna pay tickets. Robert, so people are paying tickets to a cashier. What do we do about the people that don't pay tickets for 90 days or 100 days or even a year? What do we do about those people? I'm pretty sure the city does not have a process in the collections business. So how would we do that, Bob? Because that's something the finance department can do, or do we need to get a third party vendor to assist with that?
Well, is the issue to chase after or take them to a special magistrate?
It would be to either or. It could be either go to special magistrate if they don't pay, or it could be just sitting there and it's just unpaid fine, and that fine goes up to whatever maximum fine that is, or whatever interest is based on that, or however it's done.
My experience with collection agencies, usually they're not highly productive. That's usually in regard to chasing tenants who haven't paid water bill, from my experience. This would be different because these are residents of the city. So the collection agency might be more effective in this case.
Okay, and that's infrastructure that has not been built as of yet. So we have a cashier. We do have cashiers that can take payments, but we don't actually have the ticket book mechanism, the actual civil citation mechanism that is required, which is a ticket book that needs to be done and produced. And then from there, it needs to be issued either by code enforcement and police. And those items need to be stored in a database. Letters need to go out notifying people that they receive citations. This is the date of court, or this is the date you see the special master, and various different things like that. Individual either pays the ticket or sees the special master, and either the special master throws the ticket out or raises the fine or gives somebody 6 weeks to pay it. Okay, and that ticket is stored in some system, then that requires additional staff to do those things. Robert, and does that sound right about right on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice orderly process, and I don't think the software is going to be that complicated to put together. So I don't think that's any sort of impediment.
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor, that's how I kind of envision implementation internally, how it would go from when a person gets a ticket to when they pay it, to when they go see the special master, to when they don't pay the ticket after they go see the special master, and now additional fines are stacked up, which will probably go on their credit. If you have a proper mechanism in place, a credit company, RFP'd and hired by the city, would attempt to go after those individuals, the outstanding fines that have not paid them. But this structure is not in place. It could be in place 45 days upon execution of the order. I would be safe 60 days, 45 to 60 days from the execution of order, since we have to order the books, set things up, get everything set up in an orderly fashion, make sure that the repository that Nelson can come up with as far as dealing with that. Nelson, are you line?
Yes, I'm here.
What are you envisioning? I know I'm just throwing you this, I'm sorry, ad lib. Where do you envision this repository being that's going to store all these tickets for no face mask?
So there's two routes as far as the technology goes. If we were to use how we normally issue, for example,
Hold on.
traffic tickets, they will go into the one system that manages all the city's records. So ticket will be issued, and as far as a speeding ticket or some other type of ticket, that way they get automatically transmitted to the county. The county processes them, and we just keep a record of it. If we are going to maintain them ourselves in-house, we still need to keep those records. There's an additional module that we can add to our current system that can handle civil citations, that can handle the payments received and all that, in the same repository, in one system. The only difference would be that we won't be transmitting that information to the county. It would just be for our local database.
Thank you. So those are the moving parts of the implementation piece. Not impossible, very much possible, but I just wanted to give the mayor, the sponsors, of this legislation and the rest of the commission and staff a kind of a quick overview of what that process will look like from when a ticket is issued to adjudication to the point of collections if that person doesn't pay that ticket.
Anyone have any questions, comments for the manager?
Mayor,
Vice Mayor Davis?
thank you. Yeah, that was a lot of information, especially when you look at from the adjudication, phase of it. For me, I want to look at it from a cost benefit perspective to really see, what it's going to take to implement something like this, and ultimately, what type of result, we're looking to achieve. I don't know if you could speak to any of the, financial implications of it, looking at these different ways of kind of rolling out the ordinance. Could you maybe speak to some of the finances that are involved in it, Mr. Manager, please?
Just to speak on the finances, I can speak on FTEs or bodies required. You probably require another 1 FTE of a cashier, probably require 1 FTE of a clerk to manage the process, and somebody in back office to assist as well. No more than 3 additional people as far as administrative wise to manage the program initially to get it started. And that can be used through existing personnel, moving existing personnel around right now to see how it goes, to assess if permanent placement personnel is required. As anything we know, we're implementing something new. It has its hiccups, and you want to make sure you have the right people at the right place at the right time to maintain that process. So, Mr. Vice Mayor, I will utilize current staff, make an evaluation if permanent staffing is required, if so desired by the commission, to maintain the program.
Okay, well, we're gonna do something. It probably should be coordinated, on a wider basis, like with the whole county, the idea about the county and coordinating with them. Since we, since moved to adopt the county's citation ordinances and the like. So I imagine that it should be coordinated with them, and it should be a part of a larger process. I know y'all spoke to, some sort of immediate solution that we can do that can be easier to roll out. But I don't think, I think we should just, be more in favor of the larger solution, since this is something more than likely, given the direction of this commission, that we'll commit to long term.
Anyone else?
Mayor,
Commissioner Kelly?
thank you. This came up at my meeting on Monday by residents, and some actually texted me afterwards because they watched it afterwards. Couple of things concerning was how it'll be implemented. And I hear the manager with the layout now, but the offenses, 100, 150, 250, thought was too high, especially for a community that already has limited resources and incomes. But the question I want to really ask tonight, because the manager said he would originally use current staff to try to see how it worked, buy some ticket books and whatever, but I didn't hear actually a number cost of finance. Would you be using the same special master that you're using now? Would you have to go out and get another one? Because I heard you say you had to go out and do an RFP for the company who would maintain it or manage it through the credit card or whatever. So I know that's the cost. I really would like to know in a number, what is the cost to roll this out, even if you use current staff? Because we're kind of like the only one doing this. Everybody else is telling you to wear a mask. We're making it mandatory, So we're actually kind of implementing, or would be implementing, something for the long haul in terms of pandemic. So what would be the dollar amount? Because we're also asking another layer of our police officers in terms of writing these citations, if you will, for the mask, et cetera. So what would that dollar amount be? I would really like to know, because I don't want us to just create this, and I know why we want to do it, to kind of enforce or help people understand the importance of wearing the mask and to mitigate or to have those numbers go down. But what would be the cost over the long haul? Because to me, it sounds like we might be creating something that really is not manageable in the long run. It's not going to be as helpful as we'd like it to be. So, Mr. Manager, could you speak to those concerns, please?
So as I envision, as far as financial implementation, financial numbers in regards to the program, I foresee the first year's numbers not looking at any income coming in, because I don't know how successful the program is going to be. So I'm not looking at any revenue coming in. I look this to be about $100,000 of man hours, personnel man hours for the year to manage and maintain the program and actually conduct enforcement, if not more than that. That number is modest that I'm using, because you are using existing staff, law enforcement, code enforcement staff, as well as other staff, most likely from the code enforcement department. They're trained on logging and actually monitoring citations and their due dates and those processes. So this is something most likely will go into the code enforcement department. So their workload would rise, which will require me probably to bring in an additional body or two to assist them in maintaining those tickets and citations as they come in.
What about the special, Mr. Mayor, to the manager? What about the cost normally for special masters? I know they're on retainer. They normally get paid out of whatever occurs, correct?
I haven't looked at the special master's contract recently. Madam Attorney, how typically is a special master paid, like their contract structure, if you have it on top of your head? Not for this one, but just generally ones you've dealt with before.
Well, what would matter is this one. I'm not sure how you all paid them. I'm happy to look at it and have it at the next meeting, but I don't have that contract in front of me.
The reason I'm asking, we would not, I don't know, we probably would be using a separate special master, or would you try to do something with this contract that you already have, since a lot of those cases come at the same time? You might be dealing with the same people. That's the reason I'm asking that question, because you got to go out for a special, someone else, you got to put that on the streets, get it back in, et cetera, so forth. Along with the outside company or whoever you would have with the credit card structure. That's why I asked that question. So you're not sure if you could use even the same one and add to their contract, and if you did, it would have to come back to the commission, Madam Attorney?
Yes, that's a consideration. I mean, I'm not sure what the manager is proposing, but you could either take it out and have a special magistrate through which you have to have a process selected just for COVID-19 cases, or you could probably, the more reasonable thing to do would be to roll it into the process that you already have. But that's really a manager, one of the kind of administrative things the manager will be better equipped to answer. You could do either.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, to the manager again, I'm assuming the least minimum cost, if you could utilize the same special master, assuming you could, that would save you some dollars. You just would restructure their agreement. I'm assuming, I shouldn't assume, let me ask the question.
That'd be correct. And as far as the numbers I gave, I just got some feedback from finance. For the personnel, using 3 people is $180,000, $50,000 for police time for admin, and We also have to do a different calculation for code enforcement man hours and time to be incorporated in there. So there's going to be about $250,000 of income, or I'm sorry, expenses. That's not even including the revenue that's coming in from the ticket. So it's $250,000 that probably had to be implanted in the budget to run this program. That's the overhead to maintain and manage the program.
Wow. Well, I'm gonna tell you, just hearing that, this is the first time I'm hearing these numbers. I'm in favor of pushing for a mask and wearing a mask. But if we gotta expend that kind of money, even if I were to not agree with your numbers and say it was cheaper, $200,000 even to implement a program that we don't know if we're gonna even recoup anything in the first round, financially, a real stretch. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have to rethink this whole support of this mask ordinance altogether, hearing those kind of numbers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Manager, for your answer.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Burke.
and we got North Miami to the east of us, Hialeah to the west of us, Miami Garden to the north of us. And these are bigger cities. And with these bigger cities, I think what they have worked with was educating their citizens. And like I said before, we are talking about taxing our residents. Some that probably don't even have money to buy a mask. And then we're saying, okay, we're gonna send it to a collection agency. Some of our residents' credit is not that great, and those of us that are trying to redo our credit, once we can't pay this fine for this mask ordinance, then it goes to a collection agency. That's just another burden. That's just another burden on the residents. I mean, if all the effort we're putting into this, trying to create a mask ordinance, Miami Gardens don't have one, Hialeah don't have one, North Miami don't have one. Now we're learning that it's going to be a big impact, financial impact on the city. If we could just put all this effort into educating our residents rather than trying to put another burden on our residents, I think that would serve us better. Remember, when we were elected, we said we were coming here for change. We wasn't coming here to burden our residents. And like I said, this will put a big burden on our residents. And I think we can just as easily, you already got Ms. Markins doing signs. We put the signs up around the city, educate our residents rather than putting a financial burden on our residents and also putting a financial burden on the city. We're going to spend all of this money to put this mask ordinance in place and then not even get no revenue from it. I don't see how we can do it. And like I say, the residents are only going to see more of a burden on them financially. So like I say, we have Ms. Markins. We can do signs, put the signs around the city, educate our citizens rather than try to burden them. Thank you.
I'm gonna jump on in here because I'm very concerned about this dialogue and how it's been presented. At the very beginning of this conversation, we thought about this idea over 5.5 weeks ago. I sent the specific request to the manager to detail the fiscal analysis of this impact. And we talked about how it will be paid, what happens when the fines are done, and quite a few things. And here today, I find out in the public meeting in which none of the sponsors of this item was provided this information about the fiscal impact and talking about $250,000 as a fiscal impact. And it just don't add up. How many people are we expecting to be putting in violation each day? And why would we need so many people, an exclusive person for this one particular violation? Like, are we saying we're going to go out there and just write tickets left and right so that we can pile up violations? Because that was not the intent, I think, of any of us as sponsors wanted for this item. We simply wanted to make sure that people understand that it is not right. It is not right to go near someone else or someone else's children without a mask on during a pandemic that can infect a whole household due to the negligence or one person not being careful with covering their faces. And as a part of that, we wanted to make sure that we put a mask in place, and we have masks so that we are proactively educating people, not writing tickets left and right for processing. So to hear in a public meeting for the first time, this information is, I don't get it. I really don't get it. And then we have no report that details that information. Like, right at the moment, I would prefer that we have a clear report that is provided to this commission in writing that details the infrastructure that will be put in place and the cost of that and some options. Have we even considered the options of getting Miami-Dade County to process the citations for a fee? Is there an electronic way to go about it? There's many options that I have not heard that seem as though were just thought through just now in this conversation. I think that is unfair to the sponsor and intent of this item. We are dealing with an international pandemic throughout the city, like international pandemic. And just as though it is not right for someone to infect someone with AIDS or HIV, it should not be right and okay for someone to infect someone with COVID-19. And what we're trying to do is figure out how to put a stop to that, to reduce that, and to protect our community. And we want to get realistic understandings of what we can do as a government to do that. We're not trying to burden our residents. That was very clear. That's the reason why we made this an ordinance as opposed to emergency order that people have done all across the nation. Because if we put it as an emergency order, that means someone will can be arrested. We did not want to do that. We've been debated a while about the fines, because we also don't want to burden. Others have $500 fines. So we're trying to figure out everything we can, but if we don't have the information as sponsors to be able to really understand what it takes, then how can we even begin to continue to have these conversations? Because ideally, the fines would be able to somewhat cover the actual implementation of it. And we don't even have that information. Like, I'm literally just hearing this right now. So we had this conversation, I believe last week at the ordinance. And it's like we're having it again. And each week we're having this conversation, trying to get this clear information so that we can make a decision as sponsors of this item. And I'm just continue to be concerned about us getting the proper information that we need to make realistic decisions on this international pandemic.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Mr. Manager.
First, this is the place to present this information. This is a workshop. This is a workshop. This is not a commission meeting. This is a workshop where information is provided. This is not a venue where people are thrown under the bus or provided information late or untimely. These are, you're sitting on a video with my IT director, my finance director, my police chief, actively dialoguing currently during this meeting and based on past meetings that are providing me live information just based on talking it through and hearing the comments from the commission. Any program you turn up, you're gonna lose money at the initial point of the program. Any initiative, you're gonna lose money. The only initiatives I saw in law enforcement and policing or civil citation that have not lost money in implementation is red light camera. Red light camera is the only program that I saw that instantly obtained revenue for a city. You speak on the purpose of this ordinance is not to go out and give people tickets. It's not to go out and fine people. Mr. Mayor, if you walk out of 780 Fisherman Street, 90% of our residents on an everyday basis do not wear a mask. So do we not enforce the ordinance? Do we pick and choose who we enforce? Because that's the issue, that's the social issue that you're gonna run into, okay? You're gonna have 10 people on the street without a mask on. You're asking law enforcement and code enforcement to enforce your mask ordinance. They pick and choose who they wanna enforce. And then Mr. Bryce is getting a long email, or I'm getting a long email, or you're getting a long email about how discriminatory our police department, code enforcement department is because Jack got a ticket and Sally didn't. This is the nature of the beast when it comes to, when we talk about the city of Opa-locka. So while we want to mildly say, oh, we're just putting out this ordinance for awareness and just to show people mask wearing is possible, you're going from one extreme of doing legislation that enforces this, and then you're asking people to go outside on another extreme and dealing with 90% of the people of your population that don't have masks on in the first place. And you say the permit is not meant to be a burden on the resident. It's going to be a burden on the resident. If you expect, just like you all expect us to enforce curfew, social distancing, and various other things, you think that our officers and code enforcement people are not going to go out there and enforce the mask ordinance based on you and the commission's directive? Or do we pick and choose who we give tickets to? And then how much education is enough? So, and then us, okay, going the role of implementation and education, you're out there issuing the tickets, then we'll get a notification saying we're being too stern. You're being too stern on them. Lay it up a little bit. Don't give out as many citations. We're getting too many citizen complaints. Then the number of citations go down. Okay. So those are the dynamics that you deal with when you're talking about this ordinance. So in saying that the ordinance is not going to be a moneymaker, it's just a number that people are paying the city if they pay the city, if they have the financial means to pay the city. They don't even have the financial means to pay the water bill. They don't have the financial means to pay their rent right now. They don't have the financial means to pay their light bill right now. Now ask somebody to come pay $100 or $150 citation. No, it's not going to make money. It's going to be staffing overhead that the city is going to have to absorb and eat into our cash balance for an initiative that may work or may not. And then at one point, what do? Oh, we repeal it now because it's outrage. If you look at the cities that have had this ordinance, they're enacting this ordinance, they repealed it. They repealed it. because of citizen outrage. So all I'm saying, and Commissioner Kelly opened up the door with his question, which I appreciate. He wanted to ask what the financial implementation was, and our finance director provided those numbers in real time right now, because she's looking at her desk, looking at the numbers and the positions. So I'm providing that information. This is not me throwing the sponsors under the bus or not being informative to the sponsors. This is the venue where we do this. This is the venue. This is a workshop, Mayor. It's a workshop. That's all I'm saying. I'm done speaking.
Mr. Mayor?
Hold on, Commissioner Burke. We have to figure out how to make this work. And that's why we have been patient over the past few weeks. Since the very beginning, we've asked for these financial impact and analysis. We have I personally have emailed documentation of asking for this weeks ago. So to hear it today, we all, as a proper legislation, we as a commission need to be advised on the impacts of the legislation implementation moving forward so that we can properly propose this and move on it. And that is what I'm hoping that we can get with realistic numbers, backed up by data and analysis. So to have 3 full-time employees to process tickets in 8 hours a day. So we're talking about literally 24 hours of time spent each day to process tickets. Like, that seems as though it'll be a lot of tickets to process. So that type of dialogue, I would love to be able to have before these meetings. And I believe all of us as sponsors would like to have that level of dialogue and interaction so that we're very clear about what we are putting in place, what we are proposing. We are duly elected people, residents that do not have the day-to-day time to go in and investigate this. And that's why we have staff to do so. And that's what we want. That's simply what we want so that we can make very clear proposals with timing. And this is going on 6 weeks to try and figure this out. And we actually deferred this item on the second reading for this information. So that's all we want is to try and get that information so that we're clear. I know we do have a budget conversation that is very important that we need to have. And I know there's some amendments that we need to make to this. So I would like to just simply for us to get, I would like is to request that management provides us with the report on the various options and fiscal impact analysis of this with details and data behind the reasoning behind the expenses, what those systems will be put in place and upgrades look like. And then it also to meet with us beforehand so that we're very clear about what that looks like and we can offer suggestions and various ideas before the next meeting. This is something that we have is going to be put on the agenda. I believe we had a difference date of the upcoming commission meeting. So we have one more workshop and also a commission meeting to make decisions on this. So I will hope that we can get that information as soon as possible. Since some of it was talked about today, I hope that we can get that report tomorrow. And then we can have a meeting early next week with all of us so that we know what that looks like. And at the next workshop, we're very, very clear on those movements. So Commissioner Burke, and let's try and wrap this up so that we can get to the budget.
Mr. Mayor, can you,
No,
I have
wait
one more
a
thing to say
minute,
too.
Mr. Manager, wait a minute, please. Mr. Mayor, after you speak 30 minutes, then now you want to wrap it up. First off, the city manager sat here in this workshop and laid out the financial impact for you, okay? He laid out the financial impact for you. Mr. Mayor, I don't know why you're pushing this. You keep talking about we no, we don't want this. You want this. And remember, this is a collective commission, okay? Now, the last time we spoke on this, even you had somebody say, well, we don't even know who we're gonna be citing for the mask. Then you got people from North Miami, Miami Gardens, Hialeah, coming into the city, don't know about the mask ordinance, so we have to ticket them too. So you're not looking at the big picture. All you know now is you want to do a mask ordinance where you got big Miami Gardens to the north of us, North Miami to the east of us, Hialeah. You got 3 big cities around us that's not pushing for no mask ordinance. I'm saying the people are tired of being burdened, man. They brought us here not for a burden. They brought us here for help. And then you jump on the manager saying that he's not throwing you under the bus. You asked for a financial impact. He gave you the financial impact. So I'm saying I could never support this. I could never support this. And I'm hoping the other 2 sponsors have listened to the mayor and listened to the manager and see what this would do to our city and to our financial impact. Come on, let's leave it alone and move on. Thank you.
Commissioner Burke, to your point, if this isn't fiscally responsible, there's not something that I would support either, and I would withdraw if necessary, but we need to be able to have that information. Simple as that. We need to have that information. We got to look at that information, and we got to talk about that information. So this is information that we requested weeks ago. So of course, if we were provided that information back then, this may have not even been a conversation. Now we're provided that information. So we got to be able to, and but it hasn't been in writing. This was literally on the fly just now, as the was just as we just saw. So we just want to get that. Any other discussion on this item before we move on?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Manager.
if we can just take a moment, just a moment. Last Thursday, we spoke on this item. Last Thursday, you sent dialogue to myself and to the city attorney in regards to what you required for today's meeting. That information was received. As you may know, and the rest of the commission may know, half of my 4th floor is quarantined right now. Half of not all my essential staff are not at 780 Fisherman Street. So before statements are made in regards to stuff not being provided in writing or timely or anything like that, there was extraordinary circumstances that affected everybody on this call that occurred on Tuesday. So I have staff scattered at their homes in different places and various different things like that. So before statements like that are made, it would be appreciated if we could think about our staff members that are displaced during this COVID-19 ordeal that we're dealing with, that most of us are getting out of pretty quickly. Please take that to account. We have hearts, we have minds, we have souls. And you get your best work out to people that you maintain their motivation and congratulate them and support them and carry them and be by their side, not land-basting them. And the commission is aware of these extenuating circumstances that's gone on in this city as of this week, as far as our municipal building goes. So just take that into account before statements are made about deadlines not being made, which I know I received an email on last Thursday and now it's Thursday of this week, and other things. Just think about that. And if anybody does, at the end of this meeting, acknowledge that the city, what the city went through this week and what we're going through, and how we move in the city forward still. We're still on this line, sitting at our homes in these meetings. So just think about that. Think about that. And it's for everybody. Just think about that before you start making statements about various different things. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this item?
Mr. Mayor, real quick before we close out. The reason I brought up the whole concept of the cost benefit of an analysis, because as you know, I'm a sponsor of this item. When we all originally decided to sponsor the item, I think we didn't have any idea what the financial implications would be, as well as what it would look like in implementation and what the enforcement piece and collection piece would look like. So we decided to defer the item at the last meeting. My intent, of course, is not to expend, I don't know if those are going to be the final numbers, but it's not to expend that amount of money to implement a law that, in my opinion, is necessary, but given the financial analysis of what it would take to implement, I don't think it would be fiscally responsible to go forward with it. Because $250,000 is a significant amount of money. And when I asked staff to do the analysis of the rental and utility assistant program, my budget was like, not even, I wasn't even thinking that high, But if we are going to do something, I think it should be along the lines of helping our residents and not creating a law, that ultimately creates another burden or, create other challenges otherwise for our residents in any way.
All right, any other discussion on this item?
Mr. Mayor,
And Commissioner Kelly?
thank you. I concur with the Vice Mayor. I know we bought masks. If we're going to spend any money to promote, to educate, I'm not obviously, as I said, in favor of 250. You give or redo Ms. Watkins, give her a few more dollars to do some marketing, whatever. We hold some days where we give our folks these masks out with some kind of drive-through as part of education. And hopefully that will do the numbers, because I can't see any other way based on what I'm hearing. Thank you for your comments, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else? All right. So we'll look at those numbers. If it is at 250, like everyone else on this call, this definitely isn't something that will be right for our citizens or even the city based upon our tax base. So we look forward to seeing that detailed report and analysis and implementation plan so that we can see whether or not this is something that even is right for the city of Opa-locka. So with that, if there's no other comments or thoughts, let's move on to the budget. Mr. Manager, you have the floor.
Thank you. I will bring to the floor Robert Anderson, the Budget Director for the City of Opa-locka, to do a budget overview for FY21. Robert.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm going to take over the screen if you'll bear with me for a second. Okay, so I have lost an icon, which I think is here, so bear with me.
Bob, you can just open up PowerPoint from there.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. Go ahead and click that. There you go.
Desperate men do desperate things. Okay, so I'm good, almost. Give me. So,
Bottom right, so you can presentation mode.
oh, that's what I didn't have. Thank you.
No, right above that.
Right above that. Right above here? No.
Keep going up, right there. That
Oh,
there you go.
okay. Wasn't there this morning, but gotcha. Okay, so there we go. And now I go to the next step, which is up here.
Yep, that's it.
I learn slowly, but I get there. Okay, showtime. Okay, you're looking at the presentation for tonight. Welcome to a first look at FY21. Mayor, if I may, can I ask that anytime anybody has any questions, would they please bring them up? Because we're going to cover a lot of material. And if I'm trying to make a point that's not coming across, I don't want to waste time. And if it's okay with you, I just soon take questions on the fly as various things come up. Would that be acceptable?
Yes, sir. That works.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, and we're off. So this is the agenda I'm going to cover for this evening. To talk about next year, we have to take a look at this year. So that's going to be the first thing we're going to know. Need to spend a couple moments on revenue because, as I will expand on later, revenue this year and next year is as challenging as any time I have ever had to put a budget together. So spend a little bit of time on that. Want to spend a couple moments on staffing, give it a little bit of historical context to understand where we are today and where we've been in the past. Then I'm going to cycle back to my favorite topic, fund balance, see if I can get everybody confused again, because I think there's some very important points that need to be covered there. And so we'll like to spend a couple moments time on that. Then finally, we will get into the FY21 preliminary budget. And as part of that, or after looking at some numbers, the IT director has some very creative ideas about what we could and should be doing to move ourselves into the 21st century and implement certain technologies and other process modifications to allow us to be more effective, more transparent, and better serve our public. After that, going to offer up a couple options, things that you might want to consider on a citywide basis, not options in terms of any particular division, but things that may be appropriate, things that you may want to look at in terms of things that can be done citywide to either further reduce costs or identify other funding sources. And then with that, I'd like to close up and have a discussion, anything that has not been addressed up to this point, and hopefully get some consensus guidance as things that we definitely should be considering or definitely should not be considering. So with that, we will go down the road. Oops, sorry about that, wrong direction. Okay, message. This is a calendar, but really trying to convey a couple thoughts in it. This is a work in progress. Any number you see tonight, you probably won't see again because there are an awful lot of moving parts that we still have to try and fit together. So it is a work in progress. It is certainly not a final set of numbers. On July 9th, we will have the budget, or at least we're scheduled for the budget workshop. At that point, we will get into things like missions, measurements, objectives, goals, and that level of detail. Do not intend to get into that tonight for a lot of reasons. Don't really intend to get down to the division level. You will get another pass at the budget, much more, not much more detailed, but on the 22nd, we are required to put forth a preliminary millage, and at that time, you need to make another pass at the budget on a preliminary basis because, as was mentioned a little bit ago, on August 1st, that will be the document that will be submitted to the state. So that they'll be running in parallel with us in terms of what they're seeing and what their druthers are. Again, just to close out, on September 9th, we will have the tentative millage rate and budget adoption, and that we finish off tentatively on the 23rd with the final millage rate adoption. So that is the calendar, but more importantly, it's a statement that tonight really is an overview. It's a work in progress with a detailed review to follow on July 9th. Okay, so what I want to talk about, and I will apologize because this is really too brief. I put a couple pages of accomplishment. We've really gotten a lot more done, and next time around, I'll certainly expand upon this. But your primary funds, that's the general fund, the water sewer fund, and the stormwater fund, all have generated or will generate surplus this year based on everything I can see. That's good news, and I'll try and put that in context of fund balance a little bit later on. Property tax base, as we know, thanks to some investment in some major investment in the city, for this year, we enjoyed a 30% increase in our tax base. Just to, as a spoiler alert for what's in the budget for next year, based on the initial information that's been provided by the county, we're looking at about 5.8%. When you break it down into the real estate versus the personal property and so forth, real estate is indicated to be up around 7-8%. I'll leave it at that for the moment. We'll come back later. Very important thing to realize is that we had a budget that called for 142 full-time people. We're operating about 124, 125. So even there, we've generated a lot of savings over the original adopted budgets. For things that have been done this year, we're moving on capital projects, the water sewer, 1.4 million. That is addressing the Durham issues that have been constraining the opening of certain additional businesses. Stormwater, we're talking about 600,000. Buildings and Park, 1.0 million. That would be the 2105 project and also the project over at Ingram Park. Streets and sidewalks we covered last night at the budget meeting. We're talking about 1.7 million at this point. We increased the original street restoration from 5 miles to 6.5, and sidewalks originally was proposed at 2, and that's up to 2.6. Responded to COVID-19 challenges. I've listed a few of them here. Obviously, it's a lot more than that. We're moving forward in the operational audit finding, not at the speed I'd like, but the price of doing it thoroughly, it's come out more slowly than I anticipated. Second page of accomplishments, again, this is where it stops, but certainly is not all inclusive. The FY18 audit was completed, 3 years of audits related to the People Transportation Program, or I'm sorry, People Transportation Plan, or in CITC funding behind it. Freed up another $900,000 for road projects this year. Closed out a grant by another $214,000. Very importantly, the transfer of the billing to the county has been very productive. We're seeing revenue increases. I'm going to elaborate on that in a minute. It's certainly at least $2.5 million better than what we did in 2018 for the same customer set and basically the same consumption. So a real benefit in getting the county involved in doing the billings. We have strengthened procurement just to improve the discipline on that. CRA has implemented a facade program and is also intending to do a downtown master plan this year. The next one is new news. We haven't done it yet, but we're going to bring forward a proposal to get the stormwater charges on the tax bill. Right now, at the moment, we're collecting about the rate, an annualized rate of about $1 million in terms of what's being billed on the on the water bill. We have submitted some changes to the county within the last 24 hours, which will bring that up on an annualized basis, about, excuse me, about $1.5 million. But the stormwater charges are really based on the characteristics of property. And when you put it on the water bill, it creates a lot of problems. If you follow our recommendation, we do get it on the stormwater, on the property tax bill going forward. Not for FY21, but for FY22, that'll take it up into the range of $2.1 million. And as everybody knows, this is a very important area and certainly needs all the revenue we can get. So that's something to come at you in the next month or so. So it's really new news tonight. 2 last items, if I may, for the moment. Street lighting is being enhanced, as you're aware. We're going to have brighter LED lights, also energy saving. So the town is going to be much more illuminated at night than it has been in the past. And then just to close out the accomplishments for the moment is the bank's agreement. They had withheld roughly, by the time we get to September, about $5.5 million. They are going to cycle back to us for our use 2.7, which is certainly another benefit for FY20. What gets less prominence, they're also going to take the other half of that and apply that as a prepayment against the note. Now, the benefit of that is not realized now, but when the notes come to fruition in 2025, 2026, there's going to be a $6 million plus balloon payment. By their taking the second half of what they've been withholding, applying that as a prepayment, it's going to reduce the balloon payment that the city has to face in the mid-20s by close to $3 million. So there's additional benefit there. As I said, this really understates everything that's been done for you, but I'm going to leave it at that, and we're going to move on into the next portion. For a very quick moment, this really is kind of a gee whiz page, and it's also, the intent is to make it educational. This is what we're looking at right now in our forecast across all funds, both governmental and enterprise. About $43 million of revenue, about $41 million expenditure. Something that's often lost in commissions is that within the revenue and within the expenditures, there's about $7.8 million that's whizzing back and forth from one fund to the other. So when you really look at the revenue that's coming in, it's about 35 million and we're close to 36 million. And the expenditures out the door to third parties is 33,670,000 and change. And the difference is the fact that because of the way fund accounting is done, not here, but everywhere, you've got another 7.8 million that moves back and forth between one fund and another. For example, if a general fund were to put $300,000 into, let's say, the Safe Neighborhood Fund, that suddenly becomes an expenditure to the general fund. It becomes another source of revenue to the Safe Neighborhood Fund. But in fact, there's no additional revenue received by the city, nor was there any additional expenditure going out from the city. So that's just for education, give you a magnitude of the total amount of dollars we're talking about, and a little bit of insight as to the impact on what's real cash versus what is not cash. To take it another step further, this is within the governmental funds. This is the revenue and expenditure forecast at this point. The salient points on this is within the general fund right now, without considering use of contingency, we're talking about $2.1 million of surplus revenue over expense this year. Again, I'm going to relate that back to fund balance on another page, just so the context is not lost. If you look at the bottom, you'll see there is a footnote there that says that the 2.1 million that's highlighted for general fund anticipates the full use of another $1.1 million of contingency, or $186,000 of contingency. That will be used only if a major unknown occurs, such as a major hurricane damage or something like that. If we don't have to use that contingency, then the 2,151,000 up above is actually going to be a 3 million plus surplus of revenue over expense, which is certainly good news, and I'll elaborate on that further. CRA at the moment is showing a surplus of 15,000. I will remind you that during the course of the year, we did approve the transfer of $343,000 back to the water sewer fund from this fund. If that had not occurred, the surplus would be closer to $350,000. People transportation plan, you'll see a use of fund balance of $223,000 that was discussed last night as part of the budget amendment. Important thing to remember on the People's Transportation Plan is, unlike the general fund, there's no need for it to maintain even minimum fund balance. Its fund balance is meant to be spent, and we're taking advantage of it in FY20, and certainly plan to do it in FY21. Safe Neighborhood for the moment is break even. I'll explain that further. Debt service, the 1,000,006 is not a number to frighten you. That in fact reflects that unlike the budget, the debt service fund will be returning to the general fund 2.7 million. The budget had assumed somewhere 1.1, this is a difference. So this is, even though it's a negative number, it's certainly good news. It represents additional funding to the general fund balance. So that pretty much completes any discussion that I think is relevant on the governmental funds. Very quick oversight on the water, sewer, and stormwater funds. Both of them are generating surplus. It's good news. And with that, unless there's any question, I'm going to move on. So the overview in for the FY21 budget itself, going to cycle back to the revenue. I claim it's uncharted waters because both this year the revenue is uncertain, when at this point we should really know with pretty great certainty. And for FY21, it really is speculative at best. So it changes the complexion of the budget. Usually it's a budget where certainly in municipal government, you have a pretty firm understanding of revenue, have a pretty firm understanding of expenditures, and then it gets down to what trade-offs you have to make. For this budget, we're really going to have to talk to the uncertainty of the revenue. Property tax base is going to be up just about 6% based on preliminary numbers that were received by the city at the start of the month. As I said, for the other funds, revenue is really unknown at this time. Enterprise fund, the water sewer revenues I mentioned a moment ago, going to county billing certainly has been a blessing. There are uncertainties, which I'll get into in a little bit of detail, but for FY21, assume it's going to be flat with FY20. For the view of the stormwater, as I said, right now we're billing at an annualized rate, and it's based on the water bill, about $1 million a year. With some information that we provided to the county today, it's going to go up next year. Certainly going to look at least $1.5 million. And as spoiler alert, if you accept our recommendation again on the property tax bill, by FY22, it's going to be up to $2.2 million. I have not brought in anything in terms of any federal relief from programs or FEMA reimbursements. You have been brought up to speed on the expenditures on that. I will add that as of today, we did submit, or I'm sorry, as of tomorrow, a application will be submitted that looks like it will get us $84,000. That has not been brought into the forecast, or has it been brought into next year. Certainly the thrust of the budget is to focus on city priorities, as has been discussed. Certainly by the end of the next year, the audits will be current. That would be FY19, FY20. The 5-year recovery plan should be submitted at the end of this fiscal year, if not sooner, and certainly be approved by the time we get into next year. We foresee the utility billing issues being resolved. A recommended plan will be brought forward shortly. I said good progress on resolving flood issues. The Stormwater Fund is starting to generate the funding available to address it. It's going to be a multi-year process, certainly. We will make progress in FY21, but certainly we can't declare victory at the end of that year. We'll continue to make good progress on roadway restoration. They anticipate a re-audit of the operational audit issues late next year, or next calendar year, and certainly I'm sorry, at the beginning of the next calendar. Let me say again, start of the next fiscal year, or the end of this calendar year, and certainly expect to pass that with flying colors. Capital projects in there, it is less than what you were exposed to this year. The stars were aligned this year in terms of funding became available. Less so next year, certainly on the governmental sides. We are looking at the moment of $1.4 million in terms of investment on the roads. In terms of water sewer, we're looking at $4.5 million, which is primarily the Carroll Lane project, and then secondarily additional relining. Stormwater, that program started to take off, $500,000 to be spent in terms of a stormwater master plan, and then another $1 million in investment. One thing that I will bring to your attention now, and I will cycle back, is the county debt service. Right now, this year is 1.2. There is a possibility that they're going to come back to us and request another $500,000 a year next year. And that would be, again, over a 5-year period. This, I have not included the $500,000. As you see, we have some issues with water sewer fund. This is going to add to it, and it's going to be a problem that really has to be dealt with. Cycling back to a couple other goals for FY21, Finance Department is anticipated to be at full strength and full effectiveness. And as mentioned a couple minutes ago, would be the implementation of several of the technology initiatives that we're going to discuss tonight. Are there any questions so far? There are none, I will move on. Underlying assumptions in the budget. For the moment, I have 9.8 mils in as a continuation of the millage rate that was in effect this year. If the collective desire of the commission to do something other than that, a tenth of a mil would change the revenue by $109,000. I've maintained the collection rate at 95% because of the way the sale of tax certificates are done. Unless that falls apart, anything that becomes delinquent in April is going to go up for sale in June, and historically, those have usually all been collected. That would result in a 95% collection rate. Staffing assumptions, general fund is frozen with the exception of growth in finance to ensure that we don't backslide to where we were before. The enterprise funds, because they are in a little better shape, some limited growth has been brought in. Compensation has been maintained flat. There is, at the moment, a general fund contingency of $1 million built in. That is consistent with the ordinance in effect at this time. Health costs, for the moment, because we don't have any better information, historically, it has always been planned at 10% fortuitously. It's come in a little bit less. If it were at 10%, it's going to add approximately $100,000 of additional expense spread across all your major funds. General insurance costs has been assumed to have a 10% increase. Hopefully it's not going to be that. We don't have any indication one way or another at the time. If in fact that does materialize, that adds another essentially $250,000 to the preliminary budget. I should add, just to avoid confusion, both the general fund contingency, the health cost increase, and the general insurance cost increase have been built into the numbers you're going to see tonight. Otherwise, no growth in operating expense. In fact, it's down slightly. On the enterprise fund side, for the county water and sewer charges, historically, that's been a 3% increase. That's what's been built in at this time. There are offsets because of work that's being done in terms of your utility infrastructure. Being offset, anticipated there should be some improvement in the water loss measurement and also some increase in the percentage of I&I that's getting into the sewer system. So that's pretty much a wash. Want to go back, address three issues which I alluded to previously: fund balances, revenue estimates, and staffing. Back to my favorite chart on fund balances. I'm showing it against the 6 major funds that really impact the way the city does business. The top line is the FY18 audit, and again, as has been discussed before, it has, as per the audit, it's close to a negative $4 million available fund balance at this point. If I can just run down that column with you, right now, the estimate on the general fund, and really it's my estimate based on numbers that have been available in the accounts prior to any scrubbing by the accounts in terms of getting ready for the audit. Roughly a $600,000 improvement, which would get the balance down to about 3.3 negative. You have seen previously on a prior chart a estimate for this year of 2.1 million, further improvement, which could go to 3 million if all of that contingency is not necessary. But using the 2.1 number, it would get our fund balance, the general fund, down to about 1.192 million. And at the budget preliminary budget you're going to see this year at the moment, and again, it's a work in progress, be $163,000 further improvement to get the fund balance at the end of FY21 down to a negative 1.0. Now, just a reminder, if we don't need the contingency this year, and if we don't need the contingency next year, in fact, that would be enough to swing it positive to about 1 million. But it's whatever it is, it's a reminder that it's meant to be up around $3 million. So regardless of where it comes in next year, we still have a long time to go. Are there any questions on the general fund balance? Because it seems to get into a lot of our conversations, and I'm not sure that it's always appreciated. Any questions on this?
Mayor?
Mr. Kelly?
I was trying to catch him when he was way back, a while back, going back to his forecast on the governmental funds. So I'll ask those and catch up where we are now. You made some comments when you were talking about the forecast for fiscal year 20 in reference to funds returned to the general fund. You said, I believe you said $2.1 million returned to the general fund.
Yes, sir, Commissioner. I've got it on the screen right now. The forecast, before assuming for the moment we have to use all of the contingency that's still in there, 1,086,000, would be a surplus of revenue over expenditures of 2,151,000. And as the page I was on a moment ago shows how that starts to improve your general fund available fund balance.
Okay, and you mentioned that in the general fund and your yellow line item at the bottom, if we don't use whatever, any of that, then you would have a 3 million surplus at the end if you don't use that.
Yes, sir, that's correct. Again, a $3 million surplus against a $3.5 to $4 million fund balance going into the year.
Okay.
So it's great news, but it doesn't get us out of the woods.
Okay. I see town center, you're still just balancing revenue expenditures because we're still, I use the term subsidizing that building.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Manager, is there anything we're still looking to do to get that from just totally under city debt? Hopefully you've got some ideas of start thinking some things to lower that, I would hope. Over on the fiscal 21 preliminary budget overview, you said you projected good growth in 20 on the water and sewer and flat, and 2021, was that correct?
Yes, sir. I've got this on the screen right now. I think that's what you're referring to.
Okay, and the other thing on that particular page, you said tomorrow you were submitting something for 400,000. I couldn't understand you or hear you.
I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear. That has to do with the, where is that? What I was referring to at the moment, I'm not sure which page I was talking to, but let me try and state it again. We are billing for stormwater fees on the water bills that the county is putting out right now. They do not have a complete set of stormwater charges on those water bills at this point. There was a lot that were in dispute. An engineering study has been completed. It gets us most of the way where we have to get to. We have submitted information to the county to allow them to update their water bills. What that will do is, whereas they are billing on an annualized rate this year of about $1 million for the stormwater fund, once the additional stormwater charges are added to the water bills not currently being charged, it will take it up to an annualized billing rate next year of $1.5 million. In other words, about $500,000 improvement over what we're realizing today.
Okay, and you mentioned on the fiscal year 21 preliminary assumptions, you said that the county water, and let me just also, I asked for a copy of printout of this, and that bottom line is not on the printout, so y'all might want to make sure y'all.
No, sir, I apologize. I realized that I had left that off there.
Yeah.
As you go through the presentation, there are 1 or 2 lines that have been added. That was last minute. I do apologize for that.
Yeah, there's a couple of these pages where you got a last line, but it's on your presentation, but not in the printout.
Yes,
the
sir.
county water sewer charge, you said would be 3%, but be offset by lower water loss?
Yeah. Within your utility systems, you have two things at play. One, we buy water and a certain amount of it is lost for whatever reason, due to breaks and so forth. You've had an ongoing program to invest in your water distribution system to lessen these losses each time. Likewise, on your sewer system, you have various faults with age and so forth, which allows what's called inflow and infiltration that goes in. Every time you reline one of those water main basins, or at least in part when you reline it, that cuts down on the amount of water that comes in as inflow and infiltration. Therefore, we have to pay for every gallon of that water that comes in addition to the stuff that our residents put in the system. To the extent we can lessen that, and that's why you're investing in this, in the relining of these systems, that lessens the amount of water that we have to, wastewater that we have to pay to get processed. So yes, I think the rates are going to be up, but we should be buying a little bit less to meet our customers' needs, and we should be processing less that's going to wastewater processing because of the investments you're making in the utility system.
So we anticipate that we anticipate a 3%. We've already been told that, or we just kind of know that based on the criteria.
It's historical. It was suggested in some earlier phone calls. If the Public Works Director will back me up, I think there's a rate meeting within the next couple of days.
Okay. So we really don't know, just anticipate that it might be 3%.
The answer is yes. Be very honest with the money that's being put. Right now, there's a fair amount of inflow and infiltration that's coming into the sewer system. You have been, and you will continue this year and next to invest in causing that problem to certainly become less meaningful. If I was really going to be aggressive about this thing, I would argue that the savings that you get from relining your sewer system is going to more than offset any increase that you see on the increase, certainly on the rates for processing wastewater.
Okay. All right. And the last thing, I guess, that would catch me up to where you are now on the fund balance. In the people's transportation, I noticed that number as it goes decreases. That based on projects that you anticipate, or what is that based on? Those funds?
Commissioner, let me use, I've got my pointer pointed to right now. The 223,704. We discussed that last night as part of the budget amendment, and really what that's saying. If you remember the dialogue from last night, in that particular fund, we were looking at some revenue decrease because the revenue comes primarily from the county's additional 1% sales tax. And in the current environment, we think that's down. And also because of some movement between the expenses between the People's Transportation Plan and Safe Neighborhood, which I'm pointing to next to it, where your road projects are doing. The road expense in the People's Transportation Plan went up a little bit, whereas it did go down Safe Neighborhood. And the only way that you can fund that is by using fund balance. So as I said, we did start from the audit at 1.3 million. I'm estimating based on what I can see in FY19 numbers that have been made available to me, we will use 135,000 of fund balance, which will bring the remaining fund balance down to 1.2. Then based on last night's conversation, we now see the need to use another 223,000 to offset both revenue declines and additional expense, at least in people transportation, although offset in Safe Neighborhood, which would that would then result in, at the end of the year, going into next year, just under $1 million of additional fund balance. And as you can see, to just follow that train of thought down, at the moment, we're proposing the use of another 483,000, which would still leave 501,000.
That's really your line item for projects, whatever they may be.
It is the difference between funding available and the projects we want to do. I'm going to try and show you that a little further when we get into each of these funds, particularly the People's Transportation Plan. You will see the funding available, you will see the projects, and then you'll see the need, or at least our recommendation, to do the additional projects we think appropriate using the available fund balance from this fund. And just a reminder, this is a completely different fund balance than over here to the left, the general fund. And the fact that the surplus here is good news. And a reminder, as I said before, on this one within the general fund, we are to observe good financial practices to try and work that up to a plus 3 million over time. But unlike that, there is no requirement for a minimum balance in 501. So the 501 that we're looking at the end of FY21, assuming everything's approved, it would be available yet again for further investment in FY22 and beyond.
All right, thank you. I'm caught up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone else on the commission?
Mr. Mayor?
Vice Mayor Davis?
Just to kind of go back a little bit to talk about the proposed millage rate. I know that this is the preliminary budget workshop, so we're just kind of throwing ideas out. But we kind of, I guess, set the millage rate currently at 9.8%. As we begin to craft out our 5-year plan, with considerations to the millage, are there any recommendations from staff, I guess, to limit it in future years as opposed to this upcoming fiscal year?
Manager, do you want to answer that or should I?
I can answer the question. As we evaluate the 5-year plan and look at our expenditures as well as our revenues that are coming in, my utmost goal is to try to take the burden off to the taxpayers of the city. So if there's any way we can look at lowering the millage rate and still being able to maintain a nice, healthy cash balance, fund balance, and then be able to move the city forward, then that would be my objective. So we're doing a very, very diligent and hard job of evaluating all our finances as we put this 5-year plan together. And hopefully there's relief. I'm cautiously optimistic and hopeful there's relief in sight for our residents and businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. It's my hope that, maybe not this upcoming fiscal year, but in, somewhere down the line, especially as we craft, what is a financial recovery plan for our city. As we begin to make those projections, we do give, a significant amount of consideration to the millage rate and the fact that we have one of the highest in the state, as well as one of the, the lowest earning communities in Miami-Dade County. So, definitely want to release the burden on our residents long-term as we, kind of talk about this, this financial emergency and kind of what we're experiencing at this moment.
Anyone else have any other questions for the budget director at this point in his presentation? All right, Mr. Anderson, you still have the floor.
If I may, and just a reminder, the 9.8 mils here is nothing more than a starting point. You'll get 3 shots at it, certainly at the July 22nd meeting, and again, 2 budget hearings in September. So this is nothing more than a starting point. Okay, talk to the CRA very quickly. We have now, I think, covered the People's Transportation Plan in a lot of detail. Safe Neighborhood has a negative fund balance. This is not a good thing. It needs to be rectified at some point. Does not have to be rectified in FY21. And for the moment, the proposal is just to leave it where it is. Water Sewer Fund, as you can see, is negative, and at $1,322,000. My initial estimate is it's going to be negative yet again in last year's when dust settles based on information available to me. That would cause it to be negative 2 million going into this year. As you can see, the anticipated surplus of revenue over expense for this year, the 1,499,000, it certainly is good news. It drives down that negative fund balance to $500,000. At the moment, on a very preliminary basis, we're talking about 300,000 adverse. In other words, expense over revenue at this point. That is a result of a very heavy investment in terms of water sewer infrastructure in FY21. The Public Works Director and I are looking at alternative ways of funding some of that investment. If we're able to do that, the negative number of 306 certainly will go positive. Stormwater is really a bright, shiny thing at the moment. It's doing well. It's forecasted to do even better. And as I said, the revenue is only going to get stronger next year, certainly in the modifications we've made to the charges on the water bill. And if you accept the proposal for placing the stormwater charges on the tax bill for FY22, again, it's going to start to generate $2 million a year. In looking at that very quickly, you can see as you go down the column in FY21, we are proposing using 1.1 million of that available fund balance to really get started on stormwater infrastructure. Again, a good first step, a long way to go, but certainly a step in the right direction. Okay, spend a moment on revenue, and I think I'm really going to go through this pretty quickly. The greatest amount of uncertainty is in general fund other revenue. I'm using at the moment 4.5 million. The actual in FY19 is 5.3. The forecast for FY20 is 5.6. But I really don't have a lot to go on. I have decreased it by up to $1 million. We do have another $1 million of general fund contingency, which if push comes to shove can be used for that. So I'm hopeful over the next 2 to 3 weeks to get a little better insight of this year's revenue, which in turn will give me a better insight as to next year's revenue. But I do have to confess at the moment, unlike any other year that I've ever done a budget, this number really has a tremendous amount of uncertainty to it. That is really as much as I want to talk about on revenue, unless anybody has any questions. Same story for revenue on your enterprise side, as was mentioned a moment ago. I'm keeping the revenue flat for next year. I will tell you, we have gotten from the county at this point about 8 months of accounts receivable, billings, collections, and water gallons billed. And they are not as consistent as I would like. They raise a lot of questions as to quite where this is going. And it just makes it a little bit more challenge than I usually encounter for enterprise funds. But the revenue that I have folded in, I think is kind of a worst case revenue. So if there's something that's going to change in terms of what I'm aware of, it'll be upside to that number. And down below on that page, you can see the stormwater. Based on our prior discussion, I do expect to see a rather significant increase in revenue next year. Okay, as I said, one other thing that I wanted to address for a moment, because I think you'll find it useful, is looking at our staffing in terms of historical context. I've used FY14, not because particularly favorable, because I didn't have FY15 and 16, but it says some rather dramatic things. In FY14, full-time staffing in the budget was 204 full-time equivalent plus a few part-timers, but the key number is the full-time. So you can see that it was 204 in FY14. The budget allowed for 142. In fact, we are operating 125, which has generated significant savings in compensation, but has made everybody's job all the harder. So that's a 40% reduction over where we were before the financial emergency was declared. In terms of the recommendations for FY21, you can see a modest increase in general fund that really is nothing more than a reflection of finance going to a fully staffed department, which everybody thinks is appropriate, at least at first pass thinks appropriate. We are making provision at the moment for increases in staffing in the enterprise fund. As I said, it's in a little better shape, and we think the service is needed, so it's there for discussion purposes. Where do you see the changes? This is kind of a gee whiz page, but you can see, I will try to navigate you through this page very quickly. The major changes from FY14 are in community development, where it's 3.4 account decrease. Building and licenses, which was 4.2 increase. Parks and recreation, which is not down 9. Sworn police officers down 12. And roads and streets, very importantly, down 6.5. So this is, the numbers I just mentioned are comparisons between what was present in the FY14 budget and what we're recommending for the FY21 budget. Any questions on that before I move on? Okay. You can see in the enterprise funds where
Mr.
we,
Mayor?
I'm sorry.
Hello?
Yes, Commissioner, I hear you.
Kelly.
I was waiting to be acknowledged by the mayor. I can't hear him.
Yes, Commissioner Kelly, you can go.
You can go back to the preliminary budget, the staffing summary. You said that the enterprise funds were going to, or staffing wise, you project them to go up in 21.
Yes, sir. We're recommending they go up. We think certainly the stormwater fund is in better shape. We think the water sewer fund does have the potential to be in better shape. They have been very short-staffed, and our recommendation is that be an increase in staffing in the enterprise funds.
Okay, so all right, because you figure it's in better shape. Okay, and then going over to where you were just at with the staffing. 8.0 is where you preliminary project for 21. Would that take it? That would take it to a full staff?
You're talking about finance?
Finance, yes.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And that would be inclusive of a director?
It would be fully staffed. It was meant to be 8 people this year, but as you know, that didn't happen. In fact, it turned out to be 5.
Well, because I'm looking right now, you got 5. You preliminary, you're projecting 8. So besides director, you're talking about 2 more positions of.
There's a position for a senior accountant and also a accounts payable clerk, which is being filled by another person at the moment.
Okay.
It's very much understaffed.
Right, okay, and in terms of police sworn officers, with that number where we are, I know we're always recruiting, but is there any particular enhancements we're trying to do to get those numbers, get that number back up to higher? Or is that basically what the budget?
I'm sorry,
Commissioner Kelly, your mic is having issues again.
Okay, I'll log back on and go back on. You go ahead. Thank you.
All right.
I think I might have understood Commissioner Kelly's question.
Well, wait till could you wait till he come back on to provide an answer for him?
I do apologize. He wanted to move on. I didn't want to leave him behind.
Yeah, no. Wait till he come back on so that you can provide him with the answer to his question.
Exactly right. I apologize.
Commissioner Kelly, are you on?
Yes, sir. I'm back on.
All right. Mr. Anderson, could you provide him an answer to this question?
Yes, sir.
Repeat it.
Commissioner, I think I understood you were questioning the fact that the police sworn were down 4 positions at this point.
Yes, I mean, the question was, how many, is that the number where we are supposed to be at, or how many are we actually down? Because I know we had basically a number 55 and 14, and maybe that was higher than what we could handle, but what is the number?
Your approved budget for this year is 47 sworn. At the moment, you're down 4 officers, so you're at 43. And for the moment, you know, subject to where whatever commission desires are, we've left it at 43 just because of concern of the general fund revenue.
Okay, and under the town center, I see, I mean, is that, I thought we contracted out, but I see you got budgeted continuously for someone.
Yes, sir. There's one person assigned primarily to the town center.
Okay, and all right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
Mr. Anderson, continue.
thank you, Mayor. This list, just to point out that we were not, there were a whole set of requests from various department heads where they felt that they could improve their service with additional staffing. This is a list of requests that at the moment are not reflected in the budget. It speaks for itself because you can see, amongst other things, down in police, it's the 4 officers we were talking a moment ago. Within PW admin, the public works director right now is managing 14 divisions and could really use some help, but at the moment that has not been added into the budget. And Road Street, you can see there's a request to really make significant progress on that with 3 additional people. That's not in. And in sanitation, which is picking up the stuff that's illegally dumped, the request was and not honored for the moment of 2 people. So that could be done on a much more intensive basis to really additionally beautify the city. But a reminder, each one of these is additional dollars that at the moment, I'm not sure if the funding's there to support it. This will relate to, sorry, was there a question? No question. Okay, what I want to do is travel very quickly through the primary funds that compose the city's financial structure. Items that I bring to your attention here, the general fund is, the revenue is down over your forecast. And that is, as we said before, not so much property tax revenue, but it's all the other things that constitute general fund revenue. You can see the next big hitter there is transfers in down by $2.1 million. That basically reflects the fact that we got a real break in FY20 with all the money that the bank released that they had been retaining. We don't get to get a repeat of that next year, so you can see the decline in revenue. You can see compensation, which is right here, is up slightly. That's driven primarily by the additional staffing in finance, secondarily, but also the increase in healthcare costs. Everything else across the board is down. You can see operating expenses down, capital expenditures down. You can see the $1 million contingency. And as you see at the bottom here, if all this really were to become the budget, it would generate a surplus of $163,000, which would still leave us negative $1 million unless we got the benefit of not using contingency in both FY20 and FY21. Does that kind of give everybody an overview of the way the general fund budget is structured right now? We'll move on. This takes it down one level. Again, the intent of tonight certainly is not to get into the division detail. We'll do that on the workshop. We'll get into objectives, we'll get into missions, we'll get into measurements and so forth. This is just to show tonight where essentially everybody's down. The only two exceptions are finance for reasons discussed a moment ago. And vehicle maintenance is up 56,000. And if we didn't have to remove a obsolete gas tank, that would be 16,000 rather than 56,000. Essentially, everybody else has, respected the need to really hold back to try to compensate for what is unknown revenue this year. Next year. CRA, a couple things I'll point out to you very quickly. You can see the transfer out in FY20 is something I alluded to before. You authorized the transfer of $344,000 back to the water sewer fund. If that had not occurred, this would be a number like 15,000, and you'd certainly have much bigger addition to fund balance. At the moment, we're looking at 678,000 being expended next year. It basically comes into three categories. A continuation of facades program, a streetscape program, and also a CRA plan update. I haven't gotten to it yet, but what it does not include is any transfer from the CRA to the Safe Neighborhood Fund for the historic City Hall project. So if in fact we do go forward with that historic City Hall project, and I'll tell you the plus and minus of that in a moment, the operating expense of 678, recommendation would be to reduce that by 250, increase the transfer out to the Safe Neighborhood by 250 to support that project. Again, just to reiterate, that's not in the numbers you're looking at the moment, and I'll elaborate on that further. People's Transportation Plan. This goes back to the discussion of why on a prior chart you saw the use of fund balance of $483,000. At the moment, on a very preliminary basis without much to go on, the argument is that the CITT fund will be able to provide $700,000. That's a guess at the moment. It is to fund $1,183,000 of projects. If this and to fund even at that level, we need $483,000 of fund balance, which would then reduce the remaining balance going into FY22 down to $500,000. If this revenue does not materialize, there are two options, which would be either to use more fund balance or to cut back on some of these programs. And that we'll have that option as we go forward further into the summer months, get more information, and then yet again further as we better understand FY21. The Safe Neighborhood, just to put that in context, it really gets its funding from three sources. It gets its funding from gasoline taxes. It gets its funding from grants, of which we're not aware of any at the moment. It gets its funding from basically transfer in from general fund. And certainly for next year, given the revenue uncertainty in the general fund, we're not recommending any additional funding goes there. So the way it works out is whatever funds we get in gasoline taxes, we will expend on roadway projects. We get in less in terms of taxes, less will be expended on roadway efforts. As you can see, this is not a major contribution to the enhancement of the city roads, so it's not a major problem. So as I mentioned before, this has a negative fund balance at the moment. This strategy will maintain it at that level. At some point, it needs to be brought back to zero, but that can be certainly done beyond FY21. Which gets us to the water sewer fund. As mentioned before, for the moment, anticipating revenue. You're seeing grants and loans. These are not new grants and loans. These have been previously awarded, and now they're being pulled down to address the CIP projects down here. Debt service is an impediment to actually moving forward in this plan. Right now, you've got 1.2 million of money going to the county each year, which really, hopefully we can negotiate a longer payment period. But also, as I mentioned, what is not included in these numbers is the potential for another $500,000 of debt service to be added to compensate the county for what they have roughly indicated is $2.5 million of new meter acquisition and installation. If that additional $500,000 is added to the requirement to be funded each year, it's going to make a tough battle all the more tough, and really needs to be discussed with the county as to the timing of when that's going to occur. As I said, at the moment, we're looking at a expenditure surplus over funding of $300,000. The Public Works Director and I are looking at other ways of possibly funding some of the projects in the Water Sewer Fund, which could certainly reduce that and make that a positive number. Any questions, please let me know, because I certainly don't want to waste your time. Within the Water Sewer Fund, the projects that we're looking at right now, $4 million for Carroll Lane, and another $500,000 for relining of additional sewer mains within one of the collection basements. The number here is 4.5 million. On the prior page, you saw 4.65. The difference is essentially the fire hydrants, so 100,000, which are not considered to be a CIP project, and a $40,000 portable generator, which again is not considered to be a CIP project. So again, this is where the money would be spent next year, subject to your approval. Going into stormwater, as I said probably too many times already, revenue is certainly a positive story. Certainly one you can see down here on the capital line, where basically there was nothing done in FY19. Certainly the beginning of a very aggressive program FY20 of $598,000, and the proposal now is to invest essentially $1.6 million in FY21, and in so doing, start to use the fund balance. The starting fund balance you can see over here going into the year is anticipated to be in the range of 2.2 million. Using 1.4 would still leave us what a fund balance coming out at the end of the year of 1.1 million. Again, the projects here are outlined in total 1.6 million. Certainly be discussed in a lot more detail during the budget review workshop on the 9th of July. Technology initiative. At this point, I'm going to defer to the IT director to have him share with you his some very creative thoughts as to things the city should be doing going into FY21.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. I just want to take a few minutes to go over the city manager has tasked us to come up with new ways to do what we usually do. And that is to work efficiently and kind of reduce some of the waste. And we can do obviously a lot of that with technology. These are placed right now in the fiscal year 21 initiatives for IT, but some of these are actually being rolled out as we speak. Some are actually have been rolled out. The first one on the list here is the automation of the billing department. The billing department right now is all a manual paper format. Give me 1 second. There we go. So what we want to do initially right away is make all the forms all the applications, all the forms that we have right now, convert those into fillable forms online. As many of you know, the city has been sued for violation of the American Disabilities Act for having PDF files online where people were going and print them and filling them out and bring them in. That is not allowed in the current format. So what we want to do is make them fillable forms online, and those get routed to the appropriate employees. The second initiative we want to take in the billing department is require all of the plans that are submitted to be submitted electronically. This will help us to comply in archiving our plans and not losing them or getting damaged by the environment, and also having a complete record of the properties and start building a complete record of the properties in an electronic format. Thirdly is create a true structured format for the storing of these electronic files. We have the infrastructure in place to do this, and this is something that we have to work with the department and possibly scanning the old documents and creating some type of electronic storage for these documents. And lastly is create an immediate process for the submission of license application, permits, and renewals online. Right now, this requires people to come in, submit, approve, a lot of back and forth. And we want to do this, and we can do this pretty quickly and have this all online via email and by online portals. The second on the list is a public self-service portal. To kind of roll into that, we want to deploy a kind of a self-serving launching page or a hub where we can list all the commonly requested data that the city maintains. And this is, like I said, for building, this would be plans that we store. This could be, you know, possibly if the city wants to put the check register online and have create a transparent portal for this information where it should be available to the public. Instead of going around looking for different sites, different departments, we want to create a centralized hub and have this available, this information available and transparent to everyone. Third on the list is the online Rfq process. We were kind of forced into this because of COVID-19 when we started receiving requests from parties submitting RFPs that they did not feel comfortable coming in, but they wanted to submit them online. So we had to work with the clerk's office IT and the manager's office and kind of create a process. This has actually been rolled out. We're still tweaking it to get it perfect, but anyone that wants to submit RFPs, RFQs, are able to get these online. They're able to submit them online, and we have the review of the committee also online. So we still record the meetings, we still have a discussion with the parties, but everything is done via Zoom. And it's been quite successful in the last two processes that we rolled out. We are changing the submission process, and the current RFP that's out right now is actually slated on, it's on the new submission process. So we're currently evaluating that now. The number 4 is the ERP system. So as the commission has been advised over the last few audits that the accounting system is outdated. There's certain things, there's limitations, and I concur with that 100%. That system has been in place way before my time, and the limitations are obvious in pretty much every department. So as finance and the city catches up with their audits, we want to put a committee together so we can identify what are the core functions that we need from every department and what are the desired functionalities that we want to have. I know for me is the ability to handle a lot of these different processes that we're going to build, but all in one location. So if we want to pay for a parks rental, if we want to pay for a permit, we kind of want that all built into one system. So I don't think in fiscal year 21 we'll be ready to move forward, but we want to get the committee together and kind of put our wish list together. So when we go out searching for one, hopefully in fiscal year 22, we have that and all those wishes put together. The next one is upgrade cloud computing. Cloud computing is the future. The city does take part in quite a number of areas of cloud computing, but we're going to go ahead and move forward with the upgrade. One of the biggest problems that we have is that departments don't have a true collaboration tool. So if IT is working with Public Works on a specific project, you know, there might be a Microsoft file over here, and there might be some emails that we have to kind of go back and research. What we want to do is move to a platform called Office 365. In this platform, there's certain different products. One very popular one is called Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft Teams pretty much creates a collaboration tool where everyone is in a virtual room where files can be shared and stored pretty much instantly. Doesn't matter if you're sitting in your office at City Hall, or if you're at Public Works, or you're at home or on your phone. It's a true collaboration tool that I think the city really, really needs to be able to work more efficiently. Cloud computing really takes those restrictions of being tied to a desk at a certain facility. The new phone system that the city is moving forward with is a form of cloud computing, as the phone system is not physically at City Hall, it resides in the cloud. So we can literally take the phone, plug it in anywhere in the world, and that'll be invisible to the caller. The phone will be answered to this under the same phone numbers that people are used to calling, and it works invisibly. The next thing on the cloud computing is that the city would like to find some type of project management application so we can facilitate the sharing of projects and kind of tie everything together. This can be done with Microsoft Teams, but I just wanted to put that out there because it seems to be a major concern amongst all departments on collaboration. The next thing is the virtual city hall. Virtual city hall is what the umbrella really is. We want to, in fiscal year 21, we want to have every single function that's available at City Hall available online. That's a far stretch, but I think we'll be able to do it. We currently pulled all the departments for all their services, and we're going to roll those out department by department. As many of you are aware, the new website will be rolling out in the next coming weeks. And with the new website, we want to roll out these new virtual City Hall. And that's very doable, and will be coming actually sooner than expected. The next on the list is the Smart City Initiative. The Smart City Initiative is using technology to kind of embrace the Internet of Things concept, which increases efficiencies and kind of connects all of our infrastructure. For example, yesterday there was some funds put in for ACs at the Shergundi Village. The Smart City Initiative will take those ACs that typically have a thermostat sitting in the rooms that are sometimes used to raise and lower and break things. There'll be no thermostat on site except in a secure location. These ACs essentially have learning algorithms that learn how to operate efficiently and are controlled via a web portal. So if something is wrong, the unit will actually say, hey, there's something wrong with unit 3 on the fan. And this is something that we want to move to everywhere in the city. This could be for ACs, this could be for lighting control, this could be for street lighting, sports lighting. This is something that we're working already with Public Works on it. The sports lightings at Ingram Park will be part of the Smart Cities Initiative this year. The next one is the 24-hour call center. This idea started as a call center to have general information lines that are available. People want information. They should have a number to call, and it shouldn't be a voicemail and dependent on an employee having to return the call. This is a 24/7 operation. We should be available 24 hours a day. The implementation of the phone system and the cloud computing will allow this to happen as long as we have employees available. And they do not have to be sitting in their office. They can answer these phones from anywhere in the world. And that leads me on to the next one, which is the ability to work remotely. COVID-19 has taught us a lot that we have to be available to work from anywhere. We have to gain these efficiencies and basically be available to the public without sitting in the office. This is kind of redundant, but like I said, the increases of cloud computing, our phone system will allow for all of this to happen. The last one is very self-explanatory, but we still have a problem communicating to our residents, and we need to still work on transmitting this information to the citizens in a more efficient manner. I think we're still stuck on what's traditional, and this year we're going to try to work on some out-of-the-box ideas to share information. And I'm here to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Does you have any questions for Mr. Rodriguez?
Ms. Haggett?
Commissioner Bass?
I don't have a question. I just have a couple comments. I'm elated to see the direction in which our IT department is heading. And prayerfully, we can accomplish all of this, and this will definitely set us apart. I am just simply elated. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor Davis.
Thank you. Just a quick question on IT. I know that we're kind of into, I guess, the smart cities idea and the Internet of Things. As part of those considerations, are we looking at, I guess, some sort of citywide internet expansion that would be like that residents or our youth could use as they, might be more inclined to do like virtual learning and more virtual activities? Like, is that a part of those considerations, Nelson?
I don't think that we can possibly fund that in fiscal year 21. That is a very, very heavy task. It's been tried by the county a few times. It's never been successful. But what I could promise is that we could provide internet, public internet at our parks facilities, indoor and outdoor. I can definitely make that commitment.
Okay, yeah, and I know it's probably more of a long-term type of implementation, but definitely, as we, think through, our parks reopening and definitely a lot of our intermediate activities, definitely want to, make considerations for that and put something in place temporarily, even if it's, limited to our parks and our public facilities, to at least create those sort of options for our youth.
I completely agree with you. And on a kind of separate note, we're putting together a IT strategy and strategic plan for 5 years, and that's something that I'll definitely be putting in.
Thank you, Nelson.
Yeah.
Commissioner Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nelson, for your presentation of what you're planning to do. Sounds really, really good. A couple of questions I have. How deep does the knowledge of these upgrades go? Who will have this knowledge to be able to do this? Is this going to be on just the director level, supervisor level? How deep will it go? And the second part of that is there any additional training required as you make these upgrades and changes? And how will that be facilitated with staff if necessary?
So, Commissioner Kelly, the reason why we've been able to put so much in the plate for fiscal year 21, it's because it's very repetitive in nature. So the building of a lot of these processes online is it's coding for a website, which myself and Mr. Lobo are pretty fluent in. So the bulk of this is coding a website, building these forms down and making them public. For fiscal year 21, we should be able to get away with minimal training, but it's something that I have spoken to the budget director to look at in the near future, to place some specific training for staff.
Well, I wasn't really referring to you and Mr. Lobo. I'm referring to when it gets into these departments and some of the things that you're planning on implementing or implementing as we speak. That's what I was referring to you and Mr. Lobo and IT, but in some departments, the knowledge, the training, upgrades that may be required so they can be integrated, know how these systems work, if they're online, they're at home or wherever they are. That's what I was really asking.
I feel very confident saying that we and myself and Mr. Lobo are able to provide the training for what we have laid out for fiscal year 21. There's some other things in the 5-year plan that will require, for example, the ERP system, that will require specific training from the vendor. That's going to change a lot of processes that are done today. So the way that a check is entered and it goes through the approval process, that's going to change, and that's going to require training pretty much for everyone in that process. And the same will go for when we change to booking parks facilities online. That's going to require the training of the park staff on how to see what's booked and how to that entire process. So that's going to require specific training from the vendor.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because a lot of times when you do upgrades, that I noticed, particularly in government, one of the challenges always is that the knowledge or the expertise is in somebody's brain and not, if they're not there or they're not there to turn on a knob or have a code, everything stops. That's why I asked that question. So I'm hopeful that whatever training, whatever needs to take place, so it is facilitated where people can be more efficient, whether they're on site or not. You did mention about upgrading on the website. So Mr. Manager, I'd like to get an update myself, not tonight, at least an update on the new website and what it's going to look like, what's been proposed, because I knew it was being talked about, but I know you're that close to rolling it out as I'm hearing tonight. So I'd like to get that information or whatever as soon as possible. Thank you again for answering those questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments for Mr. Rodriguez? All right, Mr. Rodriguez, I want to piggyback on the rest of the commission. I believe this will put the city in a huge leap forward. In much respect and congratulations to responding to this COVID-19 with such a thorough analysis that can ensure that our public can do the city business moving forward. This is impressive, and we look forward to seeing it get implemented. So much respect. Thank you very much for providing this. With that, if there's no other comments, Mr. Anathan, you can continue.
Thank you, Mayor. With your indulgence, I'd like to go back to one page that I really did not cover some points I wanted to. I apologize for dragging this out, but I think they're important, so I would like to go back if that's all right. This is a very important page. This is where essentially all of your general fund CIP is done. You can see you've got three sources for it. You've got the money that we get from the state, which is gas taxes, which has to be expended on roadways and so forth. Get grants, or we transfer in primarily from the general fund. Two very important things here. One, you can see the historic City Hall has no expenditures for FY21. The reason for that is at the moment, we think that the total cost we're going to do a study in FY20 just to better understand what has to be spent. At the moment, our belief is that what needs to be spent in FY21 is $1.3 million. We have $800,000 lined up from the general obligation bond. We would suggest that the CRA contribute $250,000 to that. That still leaves a $250,000 gap, which at the moment, the only source for that would be from transfers in from the general fund. So for a moment, that project's on hold, depending on decisions you all might want to make. But at the moment, we're not recommending transferring in $250,000 from the general fund to make this project happen. Excuse me. There is one other important thing that I meant to cover, and I did in this page. As I said a moment ago, this is where all of your general governmental fund CIP gets done. That includes parks. We have looked at parks. We have looked at Shabani Field. We see a need to renovate the baseball and softball fields. We see the need to upgrade the football fields and make them into multi-purpose football fields and soccer fields. We're obtaining fitness equipment this year, but we think the fitness center itself on the second floor really requires renovation. The auditorium at some point is meant to be built out for numbers that may approach $1 million. And finally, there's been a stated need for a track at Ingram Park. None of that is in this budget because at the moment, we don't see any funding for it. These will be discussed with you at the workshop in the early part of July, but no, A, that we've looked at it, B, we don't see a means to fund it at the moment. So I just wanted to go back to that because I really didn't cover that very well. So unless there's any questions on these most recent comments, I'll move on. From this, you see why the IT director presented that page and not me. As I mentioned when we started going through the agenda, there are some options which we would like to bring for your consideration that are essentially citywide options if you think this is the appropriate way to go. If it's appropriate to lay off more people, a lay off of a full-time person making $35,000, and again, that's an average number, the savings on that would be just shy of $60,000. If you were to lay off a part-time person making on average $22,000 for the year, savings are going to be around $30,000. Conversion of a full-time person to a part-time person will generate savings of around $24,000. Another avenue that can be looked at is, and this is again a very broad brush approach, if you had a 1% reduction for all employees from top to bottom, that would generate savings of $84,000 for the general fund, $11,000 for the water sewer fund, and just shy of $2,000 for the stormwater fund. Obviously, each multiple of 1% would multiply each of those savings by a like amount. One third option that I'll bring to your consideration, if you believe that the revenue pressure that the general fund is going to be under for next year is really a short-term phenomena, and basically there's going to be spring back in FY22, one consideration would be to have an interfund loan from the stormwater fund. As we've shown up to this point, even with a major investment in FY21 in terms of infrastructure for stormwater, still should be a $1 million+ balance remaining at the end of the year. So that is one option that's available to you for consideration at this point. Certainly not looking for any answers, but just want to offer some options that you may want to consider as we try to balance the budget. Just as a factor, if a reduction in compensation makes sense, this is the distribution of the 123 full-time people on board at present. You can see what the distribution is. I would point out within the, not the bottom tiers, but certainly the intermediate tiers, you have a pretty strong representation of police in there, which sometimes enters into consideration. So this is kind of a gee whiz page just to give you a sense of how compensation is allocated at this point in time. So in summary, and Commissioner Kelly, mea culpa, on your page, you don't have the last bullet there. I screwed up. I'm going to admit it now. But basically what I've tried to convey to you is general fund. We think we have lean staffing at the proposed staffing for FY22. Reduced spending. You've seen reductions in operating expenses and so forth. Trying to preserve fund balance. Don't think the next year is going to be a basis for improving it to get us to our $3 million target. Excuse me. But certainly don't want to give up the progress we've made so far. CRA funding will be there. It's going to be available for new projects. One which may be considered, depending on the decisions made on the historic city hall, is $250,000 of it for contribution to that project. Excuse me. People's Transportation Plan, which is your primary source of funding for roadway improvement. The revenue has been reduced. If it comes in less than anticipated, can always use additional fund balance or cut down on the projects. That can be done on a real-time basis as we better understand the revenue. Safe Neighborhood, as I pointed out, has a problem with fund balance right now. It's in a reduced funding mode. It just means that there's going to be reduced road investment, dollar for dollar. It is really a secondary source of funding for roadway improvement. Water sewer, significant FY21 infrastructure investment. And again, just to climb back on my soapbox, current and future county debt service really is going to impede infrastructure investment. Certainly calls for opening a dialogue with the county in terms of what can be done to string out that debt. It's not that we don't owe it, but the timing is unfortunate in terms of what has to be done in the near term. Stormwater, continued revenue improvement as discussed. You're going to have a stormwater master plan completed by the end of next year, and you're going to start really beginning to make investments in addressing your flooding problems. And the point that is not on the handouts, and again, I apologize for it, is to just carry on to what the IT director covered a moment ago and go full speed ahead on the initiative implementation. At that point, open for discussion and guidance, feedback in terms of consensus of what we maybe didn't address that the commission feels should be addressed, or any other discussion that anybody deems appropriate at this time.
Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony. The floor is open for discussion. I think I heard Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one simple question, because you have in there on your last page, well, the one I didn't have, but the one before that, on the options, what is the actual dollar amount that you need to get to for savings that avoids any type of staff layoffs?
Commissioner, at this point, and I stress at this point of a work in progress, we're actually showing a slight surplus, which would preserve fund balance, not make it any better or any worse, actually make it slightly better without taking any of these actions. But I think as we get to the point of really trying to make some hard, I mean, there's going to be some decisions. For example, if you want to say, hey, we've really got to go ahead with the historic city hall, that's going to put another $250,000 of expenditure on general fund. It's going to take the $130,000 of savings that we're showing at the moment and then in turn create it as a $120,000 deficit. So it's going to be, the response to your answer is at the moment, none of this has to be done, but in response to directions the commission may choose to go, some or all of this may have to be done.
So if we don't do any major anything that's not either budget or you anticipate funds for, which will require some additions, like you just gave an example of City Hall, there are no layoffs would be necessary. And if you did have some kind of challenge, you could, if you wanted to, or if the commission desired, go into the stormwater fund balance where you have some funds available, if that was just something the commission desired to do.
Yes, sir, that would be an option. It would not be a forever loan. It would be meant to be repaid in 1 to 2 years, which goes back to my point. If you think the general fund is in a low point next year, but it's going to bounce back in FY22, then it's certainly going to be able to repay this loan and everything will be exactly the way it's supposed to be. If it's going to be a long-term problem, you probably don't want to do this because you're not going to be able to repay it in the short term.
Well, I'm not really for that per se, because that's historically how we got into these challenges over the years by borrowing from stormwater and some of these fund balances that had money to subsidize the general fund. So I'm not really for that. So in what you're basically saying, if the revenues hold as you think they will or projecting they will, and we don't take on any major new projects, i.e. City Hall, then you can maintain the status quo in terms of your funding and staff.
That would be a conclusion, yes, sir. As long as you accept the fact that revenue for next year really is tough to call at this point, more so than any other time in my many years of doing this.
Say it again, I need revenue what now?
I'm sorry. The revenue numbers for next year. I mean, it's a function of how fast the economy comes back. A lot of our income comes, not a lot, but a fair amount comes from the state in revenue sharing, gas taxes, and so forth. The good news is I got stuck in a traffic jam on I-95 going home the other night. So a lot more people on the road now, a lot more gas being used. But how quickly that comes back is pure speculation at this point. Typically, when you put one of these together, you have some very tried and true trends, and you can look at it, you can tweak it 2% here and 2% there. Not true for next year. So all I can do is caution you, my revenue numbers are a hopeful, reasonably set of numbers, but a set of numbers that I have less confidence in than any work I've done in the past couple of decades in doing this.
Okay, my last question then, and I know COVID-19 has a possibility of getting funds in that may offset some of our costs we've had to deal with that. If we do get some money via the county, et cetera, whatever sources, that's not really something you factor into this analysis, correct?
That is a correct statement. Right now, we're talking about expenditures in the range, roughly of 225, 250, assuming all of that is eligible, which I don't know any reason why it wouldn't be. FEMA would reimburse 75%, and then if the state becomes active in the program, be another 12.5%. So there could be up to another 200,000, 225 that I haven't brought into this. And I will also add that, as I understand it, there's still some IRMA money coming to us, and that's not brought into this at all at this point.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else? Okay. Mr. Annabin, I want to thank you again for such a thorough budget presentation. It continues to be thorough, and I'm glad that this was recorded so that our residents can go back. You showed the slides, and they can really take a look at this and hear the analysis of it. So thank you very much for taking the time to go through that. I do have a few questions, and it kind of touches on the layoffs, one of the first options you recommended. And I know that that is something many people have been considering. And I know also I think every city manager in past years has recommended that in order to stabilize the city financially. So when it comes to, I have a few questions because I understand, a few questions. Number one, how much do we actually, based upon the GOFA, how much should we have in fund balance and reserves? And where are we currently right now?
Mayor, let me take you back. That's not a number that's immediately available every day, so I can't look somewhere in the accounts and give you an answer to that. But all I can do is take you back to where we were before, as soon as I figure out where I put it. But apologies, almost there. There we go. I mean, this is the best we know at this point. The only numbers we know with certainty, and when you say fund balance and reserves, they really, for our purposes, are the same term. It's not, please don't confuse it with any contingency that we may have within a budget itself. But again, the primary focus is general fund, and what we know from the FY18 audit is that it is negative $4 million as of that point in time, September 30th, 2018, and that under GFOA standards, it's really meant to be for city of our expenditure pattern about $3 million positive. So over the next couple of years, certainly through the 5-year recovery plan, we've got to demonstrate our ability to get back to that level. I'm not sure if that really answers your question.
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to figure out, like, because with this 5-year recovery plan that we're planning on submitting soon, over this year, I want to make sure that this current year budget is allocating the funding necessary to reach that 3 million mark. So how much over the next year are we going to be contributing to get that fund balance to where it needs to be?
Mayor, again, with the caveat that, and I'm pointing at it, the caveat that maybe the 2.1 is going to be a lot better if we don't need that contingency. That might be 3.0. And then this fund balance would be just about break even. At the moment, what the budget is saying is there's only $163,000 contribution to improving the fund balance on towards $3 million. That was the point I tried to make in one of my concluding slides, which said, you know, we've made good improvement in FY20, but with FY21, with the revenue really threatened to be much lower than we would like, if we can just preserve it, in other words, 163 certainly doesn't go negative. My feeling is we've done a good job. Short of doing that, if you really want to see a major improvement in there, then I think you get forced into one of the options that I laid out in one of the closing slides.
Yeah, and that's the concerns. I know your first option was layoffs. So
Yes,
then what does that look like? And that's what I would like us to be able to see. What does that look like? If it's the number one option and we need it in order to take a step, because right now we're saying that we're not taking steps. We're just basically maintaining the status quo. So what are we doing to take those steps to get to that point over the next 5 years so that this 5-year recovery plan shows that this city, starting with this year, is taking those steps. What would that look like? So I know I don't need an answer now, but I definitely want to see that, what that looks like, because this government will have to change in order to get out of this financial recovery and deal with this COVID-19 reduction in revenues. So what does that look like? And right now, I'm at a loss of what that is. Where would cuts go if there are going to be cuts? Where would layoffs be, and what services would be hindered due to that? So if we can at least get a picture of that so that we're clear and not just, all right, this is status quo and that's all we see, that's what I would like to see. The second thing I noticed on your, you had a salary distribution, and you have 17 employees that are basically below a living wage. How much would it cost to make sure that all of our employees at least are paid a living wage?
I'm sorry, you're looking for an answer right now, which I'll have to get back
Okay.
to you on it.
All right, then that's the other
Sorry,
thing.
apologies.
Because, like, I am open to the reorganization of our staff, if that's going to make sure that everyone in the city of Opa-locka is paid a respectable living wage. So to have 17 employees not at that point, I would like to at least see what those options are, so that that is a part of our thinking and we know what that looks like.
Mayor, I think I can answer the question now that I think about it for a moment.
Okay.
To get all 17, if you've got an average wage of 25,000, and I think we're defining a living wage as 30,000. So you're talking about 5,000, round numbers, call it $5,000 per employee for 17 employees. So basic wages would be another $85,000. And then you'd have your payroll taxes and your workers' comp, and also your retirement benefits, which would escalate that by maybe 30%. So you're probably talking, and this is shoot from the hip, a number in the range of $110,000 to maybe $120,000.
Yeah. So where would that come from? If we want to seriously consider making sure that all of our employees have a living wage, where would that come from? That's the thing. I saw on your slides that one of the options, along with layoffs, was a wage reduction. There's a few things, but at the very least, I want to make, I would at least like to see what are the options to make sure that all of our employees get up to a living wage.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Yes, sir.
So what you're asking for is like I understand clearly, I understand what you're asking for, because this is a request you've made of me in my office since I've been here day one. And I know this is one of these things that you are passionate about as far as employees getting a living wage. But to discuss and giving employees a living wage in the same terminology of laying off employees and reducing costs, that I just don't feel like that's a feasible conversation in regards to if we do, just say the city does go to the point of doing layoffs. Are you saying do layoffs and make sure people get living wages at the same time?
So I would like us, we are living in a new normal. And due to COVID-19, the reduction of our revenues, a lot of cities are rethinking how they do business, because a lot of things are not as face-to-face. So I know there are going to be things that we can rearrange. So in that rearranging, and adapting to this new normal, which COVID-19 establishes that we cannot continue to operate the way we operate. Like there's no status quo anymore. We have to move into this new normal. So how will the city change? So we know that the city will change. And if the city changes, that means employees, their job descriptions, what they do, how they're allocated across departments, all of that will change. So as a part of that consideration of changing, whatever that looks like, because that's what we haven't seen, that's why I would like to see. Number one, we see that is what would it look like to bring employees up to a living wage? Right now, it's $120,000. And I see quite a few things already in this budget that may be able to be modified to make that happen. So it's not necessarily a direct of we bring employees up and we got to take away a few employees on a higher end. I'm not saying that's direct. I want to know what are the options so that we can at least have that conversation. So if you as a manager or the budget director say, okay, we can reorganize this department or that department, and due to the reorganization of that department, we're using staff time, or we may change up these projects that we have going up to do this, well, whatever it looks like. Because I know, for example, parks and recreation, that is going to change significantly. So what does that look like? What does that significant change in parks and recreation look like? Will it cost more? Will it cost less? And how is that going to affect the budget? Those are the things that I'm looking for so that we can at least have the conversation and know what it looks like.
Understood.
Question? Mr. Manager?
Understood, Mayor.
Okay. So that, yeah, I believe that was all my current concerns. And it's moving forward. I know that it's going to take some time to get our audits in. And one of the concerns that I do have is the passage of this budget using 17, 18 numbers, and how that affects our 5-year recovery plan. But I know that we are able to make a budget amendment if necessary, and we got to get this in by August 1st. So are we and will we be able, number one, to get this budget completed by August 1st to meet our requirements for the Financial Oversight Board?
If that's aimed at me, the answer would be yes.
Awesome. Awesome. And is this budget in alignment with the 5-year recovery plan?
Mayor, if I may, you're dealing with an abnormal year coming up. If you are willing to live with the assumption that FY22 is going to basically bounce back to where the city was this year, then the 5-year recovery plan is more than doable. It's, as you look at next year and say, do we need to show continual progress in terms of improving fund balance? At some point, you may want to say, this is an abnormal year. We will basically realize that we can't move forward as quickly as we intended next year, but we certainly can do it over the 5-year period to be very specific, to get a general fund balance to $3 million. So it's a question of, in a year where you have revenue, A, uncertainty, and B, probably depressed from what is normal. And it, unless you're going to argue that COVID-19 is going to be with us in the way it is today for the next 5 years, next year is an aberration but it is not the first year of 5 years of a new normal. So at some point, the decision has to be made. Do I show continuous fund balance improvement even next year when I know revenue is way out of line with what it should be and knowing I can recover with it? Or do I say, for the moment, for next year, I just want to protect my fund balance, not let it get any worse, and use that as a springboard for the rest of the 5-year program? So I'll just throw that out for your consideration, and without obviously looking for an answer at this point.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I know that we just got to make sure that as a city, we are being fiscally responsible. We understanding that we have that fund balance, and because we are still in financial oversight, and that is one of the fundamental expectations of the Financial Oversight Board, and for us getting out of this financial emergency that we're currently in. So I'm sensitive to that, and I want to make sure that we are taking every precautions and every step possible to make sure this city is in a stronger financial position and that we will overcome this financial crisis in as fast as possible. Right now, the odds are looking at us as though we've been on this, in this for going on 4 years now, and we're supposed to only take 5 years. So the longer that we take to project out this fund balance for 5 more years, we're talking about being under financial emergency for at least 9. And I'm hoping that we can get out much sooner than that, which means, as we'll do in our own family household, we tighten up the budget when times get rough, make some very serious changes and modifications to what we have to do, so that our future household, our future city can have a strong foundation to stand upon. So that is the intent, and what I would like to see is us getting out of this financial oversight, hopefully within the next 3 years. 3 years, and yeah, at the very least 3 years. Well, yeah, most 3 years. But that's just my personal opinion, because I don't think it looked good for us to be in this financial crisis for more than 7 years. It's just, yeah. So thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. Is there anything else for the on the budget?
I'm sorry, please.
I heard 2 people. I have no idea who was those 2 people. I heard you, Mr. Anderson. Would someone else speak?
I asked to be heard. I don't know, somebody else did too.
Go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say I had nothing more to add. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to confuse it.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. Commissioner Kelly?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, I want to see folks get up to a living wage too, but I'm baffled by how you raise folks to living wage and in the next breath talk about downsizing a department, and then you have other employees, while they may make good money, they haven't had an increase either. So I hope when they're doing their analysis, you kind of look at that if we're going to be going in that vein, because otherwise it's kind of self-defeating. When you're in an emergency situation, it's very challenging, but you start talking about raising salaries on anybody, even though they are underpaid, and I totally agree. Just because I make a little bit more or whatever, I shouldn't be penalized for that either. That's just something to consider. And I bring that up because that's come up before. We've had budget challenges and trying to increase or decrease to equal things out. So I look forward to seeing what the manager and the budget director come up with. But thank you all for the presentation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and to your point, I hear you loud and clear, Commissioner Kelly. To have 17 people may have to work multiple jobs to feed their families. That is something near and dear to my heart, and I know to many of those that have to work multiple jobs in order to survive. So I want to just see what that looks like. And as I said before, it's not just relegated to reducing staff, but that was the number 1 and also number 2 option that was put up. So I'm hoping that we can see more options. We can see what we can do, and just really look at this government and re-envision a new government that is respectful to all of our city residents' needs, business needs, and also our employees. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Anathan, for this budget presentation and for being tonight. If there's no other remarks, the motion to adjourn.
Move it.
Motion
Moved by
adjourned.
Commissioner Kelly,
Second.
second by Vice Mayor Davis. Thank everyone for your time this evening. You have a good evening. Thank you very much.